My son lay in a hospital bed with tubes running in and out of his body like a spider web. His face was swollen purple and unrecognizable. In the next bed, separated only by a thin curtain, an elderly woman with silver hair stared at the ceiling. She had no visitors, no flowers, no get-well cards. For 3 days I brought her breakfast from the cafeteria because nobody else seemed to care if she ate. I thought she was senile. I thought she was lost in her own world. I was wrong. On the morning my son was set to be discharged while his wife was arguing with the billing department, this frail woman reached out and grabbed my wrist with a grip that felt like steel. Her eyes, which I thought were cloudy with age, suddenly became sharp and terrified. She pulled me close, her voice a raspy hiss right into my ear. "It was not an accident, Mr. King. Run. Run away from him now before you end up in the morgue. My name is Reginald King. I am 70 years old. To my neighbors in this quiet Chicago suburb, I am just a retired widower who drives a beat-up truck, tends to his garden, and lives on a fixed pension. They see my gray hair, my slow walk, and my calloused hands, and they assume I am fragile. They assume I am simple. They have no idea that for 40 years I was a structural engineer whose patents keep half the skyscrapers in this country from collapsing during an earthquake. I learned a long time ago that the strongest foundations are the ones you cannot see. I kept my wealth hidden to protect my family. I wanted my son to build his own character, not live off my success. But 3 nights ago, standing in that sterile hospital room, I realized that the only thing my silence had protected was the monster sleeping under my own roof. It started with a phone call at 2:14 in the morning. No good news ever travels at that hour. The ringtone sliced through the silence of my house like a siren. I fumbled for my glasses, my heart hammering against my ribs before I even answered. It was the emergency room at St. Jude's Hospital. "Your son Terrence has been in a severe car accident," the voice on the other end said. "You need to come immediately." I did not even change out of my pajamas. I threw a trench coat over them, grabbed my keys, and drove through the red lights. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Terrence is 38 years old. He is my adopted son, the boy I took in when he was just a toddler, the boy I raised to be a man. I thought of him lying on a stretcher, bleeding, dying. I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Please don't take him. He is all I have left since my wife Althea passed. When I arrived at the emergency room, the chaos hit me like a physical blow. The smell of antiseptic and old blood, the beeping of monitors. I rushed to the nurse's station, breathless. "I am looking for Terrence King," I gasped. Before the nurse could answer, I heard a voice that made my stomach turn. It was Kimberly, my daughter-in-law. She was standing near the vending machines, not crying, not pacing in worry. She was arguing with a young nurse, her voice shrill and demanding. "I need his wallet," she was shouting. It was in his jacket pocket. There was cash in there, almost $500. "I need you to find it right now." I stopped in my tracks. Her husband was lying in a trauma room, possibly fighting for his life, and she was worried about $500. Kimberly is a petite woman with blonde hair and a smile that she can turn on and off like a light switch. I never trusted her. From the moment Terrence brought her home 5 years ago, I saw the way she looked at my house, assessing the value of the furniture, disappointed that I wasn't living in a mansion. But tonight, her greed was naked. "Kimberly," I said, my voice low and stern. She spun around, startled. "Oh, Reginald," she said, her face instantly crumbling into a mask of performed grief. "It is terrible. Just terrible. They won't let me see him." "Is he alive?" I asked, ignoring her dramatics. "He is in a coma," she sobbed, but there were no tears in her eyes. "The doctors say he has broken ribs, a concussion, and internal bleeding. They don't know if he will wake up. And now, these incompetent nurses have lost his personal effects. We need that money for the deductible, Reginald." I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was wearing perfectly applied makeup. Her clothes were neat. She didn't look like a woman who had just received the worst news of her life. She looked like a woman handling an inconvenience. I walked past her to the doctor who had just emerged from the trauma unit. He looked exhausted. "Mr. King," he said, "your son is stable for now, but he is lucky to be alive. The vehicle rolled over multiple times. It is a miracle the roof didn't collapse on him." "Can I see him?" I asked. The doctor nodded. "Briefly, he is in the ICU." I walked into the room. The only sound was the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator. Terrence looked small in the bed, his face bruised and swollen, a bandage wrapped around his head. My heart broke for him. No matter how many times he had borrowed money and never paid it back, no matter how many times he had disappointed me, he was still my boy. I pulled a chair up to his bedside and sat down. That was when I saw the other patient in the room. In the bed next to Terrence, separated by a thin blue curtain that was half open, lay an elderly African-American woman. She looked frail, her skin like parchment paper stretched over brittle bones. She was awake, staring at me with an intensity that was unsettling. I nodded to her politely, trying to be respectful. "Good evening, ma'am," I whispered. She didn't blink. She just watched me. Her eyes darted from me to Terrence, then back to me. It was a look of pure fear. Kimberly burst into the room a moment later, bringing a wave of expensive perfume that masked the hospital smell. She didn't even look at the old woman. She went straight to Terrence's bedside table and started opening the drawers. "What are you doing?" I asked my patience wearing thin. Looking for his phone, she snapped. "I need to check his messages. He was supposed to meet a client tonight. I need to cancel." A client. I frowned. It was 2 in the morning. Terrence had told me he needed to borrow my truck to help a friend move apartments in the city. That was why he had my 1990 Ford F-150. Why would he be meeting a client in a beat-up truck in the middle of the night? "He works hard, Reginald," she said defensively, finally finding the shattered remains of his phone in a plastic bag the nurses had left. She tried to turn it on, but the screen was black. "Damn it," she hissed. "Kimberly," I said, standing up. "He is unconscious. Stop worrying about his phone and hold his hand." She glared at me, her blue eyes cold. "Don't tell me how to grieve Reginald. We have bills to pay. Not all of us have a fat pension to sit on." I sat back down, saying nothing. I didn't have the energy to fight her. I looked past her toward the window. Down in the parking lot, I could see the tow truck arriving with the wreckage of my vehicle. My stomach dropped. The truck was a mangled heap of metal. It was unrecognizable. But something didn't make sense. If Terrence was helping a friend move in the city, why was the truck covered in red clay dust? That kind of red clay is only found on the winding roads of Blackwood Canyon, 20 miles in the opposite direction. Why was my son driving my old truck on a dangerous mountain road in the middle of the night when he said he would be in the city? The question gnawed at me all night. I stayed in that chair watching the rise and fall of my son's chest. Kimberly eventually fell asleep on the small sofa in the corner, snoring softly. But the old woman in the next bed, Ms. Etta, never closed her eyes. Every time I looked up, she was watching me. Over the next 3 days, a strange routine developed. I practically lived at the hospital. Kimberly would come and go, always complaining about the cafeteria food, the uncomfortable chairs, or the nurses. She spent more time on her phone in the hallway than she did with her husband. Ms. Etta, I learned, had no family. No visitors came for her. The nurses were overworked and often forgot to bring her meal trays on time. On the second day, I saw her trying to reach a cup of water with a shaking hand. She couldn't reach it. Kimberly was sitting right there, scrolling through Instagram, ignoring the woman's struggle. I got up, poured a fresh cup of water, and held the straw to Ms. Etta's lips. She drank greedily. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping together. "You are welcome, ma'am," I said. "My name is Reginald." "Etta," she replied. From then on, I made sure she ate. I brought her extra Jell-O from the cafeteria. I adjusted her pillows. We didn't talk much, but there was a silent understanding between us. I saw the way she looked at Kimberly when my daughter-in-law wasn't paying attention. It wasn't just dislike, it was suspicion. On the 3rd morning, Terrence woke up. It was a relief, but it was also strange. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask about the truck. The first thing he did when he opened his eyes and saw me was flinch. He looked terrified. "Dad," he croaked. "You are here." "Of course I am here, son," I said, reaching for his hand. He pulled his hand away quickly, wincing as if my touch burned him. Kimberly rushed over, pushing me aside. "Baby, you are awake." "Oh, thank God. We were so worried about the insurance. About you." She leaned in close to him, whispering something in his ear that I couldn't hear. I saw Terrence's eyes widen. He nodded slowly, his gaze shifting to me, then looking away shamefully. The doctor came in and did an assessment. Remarkably, Terrence was going to be fine. He had a severe concussion and broken ribs, but no permanent damage. He could be discharged the next day. Kimberly was ecstatic, but not for the right reasons. She immediately started asking the doctor about disability paperwork and injury settlements. While she was distracted, I turned to gather my coat. I needed to go home and shower. Mr. King. A small voice called out. I turned to Mrs. Etta's bed. She was sitting up, looking agitated. Her monitor was beeping a little faster. Yes, Ms. Etta. Do you need water? Come here, she said. Closer. I walked over to her bedside. She looked past me, ensuring Kimberly was still arguing with the doctor in the hallway. When she saw the coast was clear, she reached out. Her hand, bony and cold, clamped onto my forearm with surprising strength. Her fingernails dug into my skin. She pulled me down until my ear was inches from her lips. The smell of stale hospital air and fear came off her in waves. It was not an accident, she whispered. I frowned, confused. What do you mean I heard him? She hissed, her eyes darting toward the door where Kimberly was standing. The night they brought him in. He wasn't fully under yet. He was mumbling. He thought he was talking to her. Talking to whom, I asked, my heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm. His wife. He said it didn't work. He said the brakes were supposed to fail later. He said he messed up the timing. I froze. My blood turned to ice in my veins. The brakes! He did it to himself. Mr. King, she said, her voice trembling with urgency. But he didn't mean to be in the truck. He was talking about the insurance money. He said the old man was supposed to be driving it. The room spun. The red clay dust. The mountain road. My truck. I was supposed to go fishing that night. I always went fishing on Tuesday nights up in Blackwood Canyon. It was my routine. But my back had been acting up, so I stayed home. Terrence had come over unexpectedly and asked to borrow the truck for a friend. He wasn't borrowing it. He was taking it to test his work. Or maybe he forgot. Maybe he was so high or so desperate that he forgot he had sabotaged the very vehicle he was driving. He was crying about the money. Ms. Etta continued, tears welling in her cloudy eyes. He said she is going to kill him for messing it up. He is afraid of her, Mr. King. But you need to be afraid of him. She squeezed my arm harder, desperate to make me understand. Run, she whispered. Run away from him now. Run before you end up in the morgue. They are not done. I heard her on the phone yesterday. She said Plan A failed, so they have to move to Plan B. I stood up straight, my mind racing. I looked at Terrence, my son, lying in the bed with his eyes closed, feigning sleep. I looked at Kimberly in the hallway, laughing at something on her phone. Plan B. Thank you, Etta, I whispered. I patted her hand gently, trying to hide the trembling in my own fingers. I grabbed my coat and walked out of the room. I didn't say goodbye to my son. I didn't look at Kimberly. I walked straight to the elevator, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. I needed to get out of there. I needed to think. But more importantly, I needed to see the truck. I needed to see the brake lines. As I stepped out into the cold night air of the hospital parking lot, I realized that the accident wasn't a tragedy. It was a failed execution. And the target wasn't Terrence. It was me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial. I called the one man I knew I could trust, Detective Lewis. We served in Vietnam together. He was retired now, but he still had connections at the impound lot. Lewis, I said when he answered, I need a favor. I need you to get my truck released from the police impound to your private garage. Tonight. Reggie, what's going on? You sound like you've seen a ghost. I have, Lewis, I said, looking back up at the fourth-floor window where my son lay. I think my son just tried to kill me, and I need you to prove it. I hung up the phone and got into my taxi. The driver asked me where to go. I gave him my address, but as we pulled away, I checked my rearview mirror. I wasn't going home to sleep. I was going home to war. I am Reginald King, and nobody hurts my family. Not even my family. I stood frozen by the side of Ms. Etta's bed. Her words were still echoing in my ears like a gunshot in a canyon. Run away from him now. The fear in her cloudy eyes was so raw and so terrified that it made my own hands tremble. I opened my mouth to ask her what else she had heard, but the heavy squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum cut me off. A nurse marched into the room. She was a large woman with a face that looked like it had been carved out of stone. She did not look at me with kindness. She looked at me like I was a stain on her clean floor. Mr. King, you need to step away from the patient, she barked. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Miss Etta needs her rest and you are agitating her. I tried to stand my ground. I just wanted to make sure she was comfortable, I said calmly. She seemed distressed. She is distressed because there are strangers hovering over her bed, the nurse snapped. She moved between us, acting like a human wall. Her name tag read, Nurse Brenda. I saw her glance toward the hallway where Kimberly was still pretending to be on a phone call. It was a quick look, but I caught it. It was the look of someone who had been given instructions. Kimberly had gotten to her. My daughter-in-law had a way of charming people or paying them off, and I did not know which method she had used here, but it was effective. "Please leave the room, Mr. King," the nurse demanded. "Go sit with your son or go to the waiting room, but leave this poor woman alone." I looked at Mrs. Etta one last time. She had squeezed her eyes shut and turned her head away, feigning sleep. She knew better than to fight. She had delivered her message, and now she was retreating into the safety of silence. I understood. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I walked back to the other side of the curtain. My son Terrence was shifting in his bed. The monitors beeped a little faster, signaling that he was waking up. I stood at the foot of his bed and watched him. For 38 years I had looked at this boy with nothing but pride and love. I remembered the day I brought him home from the agency. He was so small and so quiet, holding on to my finger like it was the only solid thing in the world. I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes and teaching him to drive. I remembered the day he graduated and the day he married Kimberly. Now I looked at him and I did not see my boy. I saw a stranger wearing my son's face. I saw the red clay dust on his skin that proved he had lied to me. I saw the bruises of a man who had fallen into his own trap. Terrence opened his eyes. They were groggy and bloodshot. He blinked a few times, trying to focus on the ceiling tiles before his gaze slid down and locked onto me. For a second I saw relief. But then, as his brain cleared, that relief turned instantly into panic. He flinched physically, recoiling into the pillows as if I were a ghost. "Dad," he croaked. His voice was rough like gravel. I did not move closer. I did not rush to comfort him as I would have done yesterday. I stood my ground, my hands clasped behind my back to hide how much they were shaking. "Hello, Terrence," I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. It was cold. It was the voice of the engineer who builds bridges, not the father who builds tree houses. "Where is Kimberly?" he asked, looking around the room frantically. He did not ask how he got here. He did not ask if I was okay. He asked for his accomplice. "She is outside," I said. "You had quite an accident, son. You are lucky to be alive." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "Yeah," he whispered. "Lucky." "Why were you in the mountains, Terrence?" I asked. I kept my tone even, but I watched his face closely. I watched for the twitch of a lie. "You told me you were helping a friend move in the city. There are no moving vans in Blackwood Canyon." He froze. His eyes darted to the door, then back to his lap. He picked at the hospital blanket, his fingers nervous and twitchy. "I got lost," he stammered. "I took a wrong turn. The GPS took me the wrong way." "You got lost 20 miles in the opposite direction?" I asked. "In the middle of the night." He finally looked up at me and I saw a flash of anger in his eyes. "Why are you interrogating me, Dad? I just almost died. Can't you just be happy I am alive?" Before I could answer, the door swung open. A police officer walked in holding a large, clear plastic bag. He looked tired. Behind him, Kimberly trailed in her eyes, narrowing when she saw me standing over Terrence. "Mr. King," the officer said, nodding to me. "And Mrs. King, I have the personal effects recovered from the vehicle. We are done processing the scene." He walked over to the bed and placed the bag on the tray table. Inside, I could see a leather wallet, a set of keys, and a cell phone that looked like it had been crushed in a vise. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks held together by the case. Terrence tried to reach for it, but his arm was connected to the IV, and he winced in pain. "I will take that," I said, reaching for the bag. I wanted to see the wallet. I wanted to see if there were receipts or notes, anything that would tell me where he had really been going. My hand closed around the plastic bag. "No." The scream came from Kimberly. She lunged across the room with a speed that was shocking. She did not move like a worried wife. She moved like a cornered animal protecting its last meal. She grabbed the other end of the bag, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the plastic. "Give it to me," she hissed. Her face was inches from mine and her eyes were wild. "This is his property, Reginald. You have no right." I was taken aback by her ferocity. Kimberly had always been passive-aggressive, always hiding her disdain behind fake smiles and sweet words. But this was different. This was panic. "Kimberly, calm down," I said, holding onto the bag. "I am just trying to help." "I do not want your help," she shrieked, pulling harder. The officer took a step forward, looking alarmed. "Ma'am, please settle down," he warned. She ignored him. She yanked the bag with all her weight. I was not expecting it. I am an old man, and while I am strong, I was tired and in shock. My grip slipped. The bag flew out of my hands. It hit the side of the bed rail with a loud clatter. The contents spilled out. The wallet slid under the bed. The keys jingled to the floor, but the phone landed right on the mattress between Terrence's legs. The impact must have jarred something inside the broken device. The shattered screen flickered to life. It buzzed violently against the sheets. Time seemed to slow down. I looked at the phone. Kimberly froze her hand, half reached out to grab it. Terrence looked down, his face draining of all color. Through the cracks in the glass, a bright notification bubble appeared. It was a text message. The font was large enough that even with my old eyes I could read it clearly against the black background. The message was from a contact saved only as The Shark. "Is the old man dead yet? I need my money." The words burned themselves into my retinas. Is the old man dead yet? The room went silent. The only sound was the hiss of the oxygen machine. I looked at the message, then I looked at Terrence. He was staring at the phone, and then he looked at me. He did not look confused. He looked guilty. He looked like a man who had just been caught standing over a corpse with a smoking gun. I looked at Kimberly. She was pale, her mouth open in a silent gasp. She snatched the phone off the bed so fast it was a blur and shoved it into her purse. "It is spam," she said quickly, her voice high and breathless. "Just a spam message. You know how it is. Wrong number." She looked at the officer and forced a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "These scammers never stop, do they, officer? Even when you are in the hospital." The officer looked confused, but he didn't intervene. He didn't know. He didn't know that the old man was me. I stood there feeling the floor tilt beneath my feet. My heart felt like it had stopped beating. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It wasn't just the rambling of an old woman in the next bed. It was right there in black and white, glowing on a broken screen. Is the old man dead yet? They weren't waiting for me to die of old age. They weren't waiting for cancer or a heart attack. They were active participants. They were on a schedule. And they owed money to someone called the Shark. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the hospital air. It was the death of hope. The death of the father I used to be. The man who stood in that hospital room was no longer a father. He was a target. I looked at Terrence one last time. He refused to meet my eyes. He was staring at his hands, picking at his cuticles, just like he used to do when he was a child and had broken a vase. But he hadn't broken a vase. He had broken us. "I see," I said quietly. My voice was steady. It surprised me how steady it was. I turned to the officer. "Thank you, officer. I think my daughter-in-law has everything under control." I turned my back on them. I did not say goodbye. I walked out of the room. I walked past the nurse's station. I walked past the security guard. I walked out the sliding glass doors into the night. The air outside was biting cold. It stung my face and watered my eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to clear the smell of betrayal from my lungs. I hailed a taxi. The driver was a young man with music playing softly on the radio. He asked me where I was going. "Home," I said. But as we drove through the dark streets, I realized I wasn't safe there. They had keys. They lived there. My sanctuary had become a trap. I pulled my own phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I had to use both hands to hold it steady. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Detective Lewis. He wasn't really a detective anymore. He had retired 5 years ago, but once a cop, always a cop. We had served in the same platoon in Vietnam. He owed me his life and I owed him mine. We didn't talk often, but when we did, it mattered. I pressed call. It rang 4 times. Reggie Lewis's voice was thick with sleep. "It is 3 in the morning. Is everything okay?" "No, Lewis," I said. I was staring out the window at the passing streetlights, watching them blur. "Nothing is okay." "What do you need?" he asked, instantly awake. The soldier in him was snapping to attention. "My truck," I said. "It was towed from the accident scene. The police have released it. It is at the impound lot on 4th Street. "Okay," Lewis said slowly. "You want me to give you a ride to get it?" "No," I said. "I need you to go get it. Use your badge. Use your connections. Get it out of there tonight. Do not take it to a shop. Take it to your private garage. The one with the pit." "Reggie, what is going on?" Lewis asked, his voice dropping an octave. "I think someone cut the brake lines, Lewis," I said. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Who was driving?" he asked. "Terrence," I said. Another silence. He knew how much I loved that boy. He knew what I was saying without me having to say it. "And who was supposed to be driving?" he asked softly. "Me," I whispered. The word caught in my throat like a fishbone. It was supposed to be me. I heard the sound of bedsheets rustling and feet hitting the floor on the other end of the line. "I am on my way," Lewis said. "Go home, Reggie. Lock your door. Do not let anyone in. Not even them. Especially not them." I hung up the phone. The taxi turned onto my street. My house looked the same as it always did. The porch light was on. The flower beds were neat. It looked like a home. But as I paid the driver and walked up the driveway, I knew it wasn't a home anymore. It was a battlefield. And the enemy was sleeping in my guest room. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence of the house usually comforted me. Tonight it felt heavy. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. I didn't go to bed. I went to the kitchen. I made a pot of coffee, black and strong. Then I went to my study and locked the door. I sat at my desk and pulled out a fresh legal pad. I wrote down everything. The accident, the clay dust, Ms. Etta's warning, the nurse, the text message, the shark. I looked at the words on the paper. They looked like the plot of a bad movie. But they were my life. My son wanted me dead. He needed money, and he needed it fast. And he had failed, which meant he would try again. I sat there in the dark, watching the sun come up, waiting for Lewis to call, waiting for the proof that would break my heart once and for all. I was not going to run. Not yet. I was going to wait, and I was going to be ready. 5 a.m. is the darkest time of the night. It is the hour when the world is silent and the ghosts of your past come to sit at your kitchen table. I sat there with a cold mug of coffee watching the phone. I was waiting for Lewis to call. I knew he was at his garage. I knew he was under my truck. I knew he was looking at the metal and rubber guts of my old Ford F-150. When the phone finally rang, the sound was so loud in the quiet house that I nearly knocked over my mug. I picked it up on the first ring. "Tell me, Lewis," I said. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the background noise of his shop. I could hear the clink of a wrench hitting concrete. "Reggie, you need to sit down," Lewis said. His voice was heavy. It was the same voice he used 50 years ago when he had to tell a soldier that his leg was gone. "I am sitting, Lewis. Just tell me." "It was not wear and tear, Reggie," he said. "I checked the brake lines. Both of them. They were cut." I closed my eyes. Hearing it was different than suspecting it. Suspecting it was a nightmare. Hearing it was reality. "Cut how I asked," Clean Lewis said. "Whoever did this used wire cutters. But they were smart about it. They did not cut all the way through. They cut about 70% of the way through the line. 70%. I am an engineer. I know what 70% means. It means the brakes would work fine in the driveway. They would work fine at the first stop sign. They would work fine until you needed them the most, until you hit the steep grade of Blackwood Canyon, until you had to slam on the pedal to make that hairpin turn near the cliff edge. The pressure of the hydraulic fluid would burst the weakened line instantly. You would go for the pedal, and it would go straight to the floor. And then you would go straight off the edge. It was a time bomb, I whispered. "Yeah," Lewis said, "a time bomb made of rubber and steel." But Reggie here is the thing I do not understand. If your boy cut the lines, why was he driving the truck? That is suicide. Nobody sets a trap and then walks into it himself. I looked out the kitchen window at the gray light of dawn creeping over the fence. I looked at the empty spot in the driveway where my truck usually sat. And then the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It fit so perfectly, it made me sick. "He forgot," I said. "What do you mean he forgot?" Lewis asked. "Tuesday night," I said. My voice sounded hollow. "Every Tuesday night for the last 10 years I go night fishing up at Blackwood Canyon. I leave at 8. I drive up the switchbacks. I sit by the lake until midnight. It is my routine, Lewis. Everyone knows it." "So the trap was for you," Lewis said. "Yes," I said. "But on Tuesday afternoon my sciatica flared up. I could barely walk. I decided to stay home. I was sitting right here in this chair with a heating pad on my back when Terrence showed up. I remembered it clearly now. The memory played back in my mind like a movie. Terrence banging on the door. He looked frantic. He was sweating even though it was cool outside. He said his car had broken down. He said he had an emergency. He needed to help a friend move out of an apartment before the landlord changed the locks. He begged me for the truck. He was in a panic, Lewis, I said. He was desperate. He probably had collectors breathing down his neck. He needed wheels, and when I handed him the keys, he was so focused on his own immediate problem that he forgot about the trap he had set for me. Or he thought the cut was shallow enough to hold for a city drive, Lewis suggested. Maybe, I said. But he drove to the canyon anyway. Maybe he was going to meet someone. Maybe he was going to dump something. But he hit that grade, and he hit the brakes, and the trap sprang. He caught himself in the snare he built for his father. "Reggie, you need to get out of there," Lewis said. His voice was urgent. "This is attempted murder. You need to come to my place. Bring the evidence. We will go to the police together." "Not yet," I said. "Why not?" Lewis asked. "We have the truck, we have the cut lines, because they will say it was a vandal," I said. "They will say it was a random act. Or they will say I did it myself to collect insurance on the truck. I need more, Lewis. I need the why. I need to know exactly what my life was worth to them." I hung up the phone before he could argue. I knew Lewis was right. I was in danger. But I am a structural engineer. You do not tear down a building by hitting the walls with a hammer. You find the load-bearing beam. You find the one thing holding it all up, and you sever it. I needed to find their load-bearing beam. I stood up. My back still twitched with pain, but I ignored it. I walked down the hallway to the spare bedroom that I used as an office. It was a small room filled with blueprints and drafting tables. I kept my filing cabinets locked. But I knew Terrence and Kimberly had been in here. I had seen papers moved. I had seen folders slightly out of alignment. I unlocked the main desk drawer. Everything looked normal. My pension statements, the deed to the house, the utility bills. But I knew where to look. When you live with snakes, you learn to look under the rocks. I knelt down and felt under the bottom drawer. There was nothing there. I checked the back of the file cabinet. Nothing. Then I saw it. The wastebasket. It was empty because I had emptied it 2 days ago. But there was something stuck to the bottom. A small piece of adhesive tape. I pulled the wastebasket over. It wasn't empty. There was a false bottom. A piece of cardboard cut to fit perfectly over the real bottom. I used my fingernail to pry it up. Underneath the cardboard lay a thick manila envelope. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. It was heavy. I undid the metal clasp and slid the contents onto my desk. It was a document, a contract. The bold letters at the top seemed to scream at me. Term life insurance policy. I started reading. The policyholder was Reginald King. That was me. The date of issue was 3 days ago. The policy was active. The premiums had been paid in full for the first year. I scanned down to the coverage amount. I had to read it 3 times to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. $2.5 million, $2.5 million. That was the price tag on my head. That was what my life was worth to the boy I taught to ride a bike. That was the payout for the brake lines. I flipped to the signature page. There it was. Reginald King. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the R and the same sharp K. But it was shaky. It was a tracing. Someone had taken one of my old checks and practiced until they got it right. And then I looked at the beneficiary line. Primary beneficiary Terrence King, secondary beneficiary Kimberly King. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from falling. They had planned this. They had sat down and filled out the paperwork. They had forged my signature. They had paid the premium with money they probably stole from me. And then they had sent me to the canyon to die. This wasn't just greed. This was hatred. This was a cold calculation that said my breath was less valuable than their comfort. I took my phone out and took pictures of every page. I took pictures of the forged signature. I took pictures of the policy number. I made sure every detail was clear. Then I put the papers back in the envelope. I put the envelope back under the false bottom of the wastebasket. I put the wastebasket back exactly where it was. I needed them to think I was still ignorant. I needed them to think the trap had simply failed, and that I was none the wiser. I stood up and walked back to the kitchen. The sun was fully up now. The birds were singing in the oak tree in the front yard. It was a beautiful morning. The kind of morning where you should be drinking coffee and reading the paper and thinking about what to plant in the garden. Instead, I was thinking about how to destroy my son. I heard a sound from the front porch. It was the distinct jingle of keys. My heart stopped. I had not changed the locks yet. I had been too busy at the hospital. I had been too busy worrying about Terrence to worry about my own front door. The lock tumbled. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy clack. The door swung open. Bright morning sunlight flooded the entryway, blinding me for a second. In the silhouette of the doorway stood two figures. Kimberly walked in first. She was wearing a tracksuit and carrying two large suitcases. She looked tired, but determined. Her eyes scanned the living room like a general surveying a battlefield she had already conquered. Behind her was Terrence. He was in a wheelchair. His leg was in a cast and his arm was in a sling. He looked pale and weak. He looked like a victim. But I knew better. I knew he was a shark who had just tasted blood. They were moving in. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They just walked into my house like they owned it, Dad, Terrence said. His voice was weak and scratchy. Reginald, Kimberly said loudly, dropping the suitcases on my hardwood floor with a heavy thud. I stood in the kitchen doorway, my mug of cold coffee in my hand. I stared at them. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My voice was calm. It was the calm of the eye of the storm. "We were discharged early," Kimberly said, breezing past me into the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator and started moving things around. "This milk is expired, Reginald, and you have way too much red meat. We are going to have to change your diet." I looked at Terrence. He rolled his wheelchair into the living room. He looked at the TV. He looked at my recliner. "We are here to take care of you, Dad," he said. He tried to smile, but his lip was split and swollen, so it looked more like a sneer. "Take care of me," I repeated. "Yes," Kimberly called out from the kitchen. She was throwing my food into a garbage bag. "The doctor said the shock of the accident might be too much for you. You are 70 years old, Reginald. You shouldn't be alone, not after what happened." She walked back into the living room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She stood behind Terrence's wheelchair and placed her hands on his shoulders. They looked like a portrait of a happy family, a portrait painted with poison. "We are going to stay here for a while," she said, "until you are back on your feet, and until Terrence heals. It makes sense. We can help each other. We can be a family again." She smiled. It was a cold smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were calculating. They were looking at the walls and measuring the square footage. They were looking at me and calculating the days I had left. "We are going to take such good care of you, Reginald," she whispered. "You won't have to worry about a thing." I looked at the suitcases. I looked at the manila envelope hidden in the wastebasket down the hall. I looked at the text message burned into my memory. Is the old man dead yet? No, I thought. The old man is not dead. The old man is just waking up. "You are right, Kimberly," I said. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt like cracking stone. "I am getting older. I could use the help. Welcome home." Terrence relaxed. Kimberly's shoulders dropped. They thought they had won. They thought the mouse had walked into the cage and locked the door behind him. But they didn't know I wasn't the mouse. I was the engineer, and I was about to bring the whole house down on top of them. The sound of glass shattering in my trash can woke me from a light doze in my recliner. It was followed by the heavy thud of frozen meat hitting the bottom of a plastic bag. I opened my eyes and looked toward the kitchen. Kimberly was standing there like a general clearing a battlefield. She had the freezer door open, and she was systematically destroying my life one grocery item at a time. I pushed myself up from the chair. My back protested, but I ignored it. I walked into the kitchen. My ribeye steaks, the ones I bought from the butcher on Main Street every Friday. They were in the garbage. My butter, my bacon, the tub of ice cream I saved for the nights when the house felt too empty. All of it was piled in the trash. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my hands were clenched into fists at my sides. Kimberly didn't even look at me. She kept tossing things. A jar of homemade preserves my neighbor gave me went in next. "We are cleaning up, Reginald," she said. Her voice was bright and airy, like she was doing me a favor. "The doctor said you need a heart-healthy diet. This stuff is poison. It is nothing but cholesterol and sodium. If we are going to take care of you, we have to start with what you put in your body." She turned around and smiled. It was the same smile she wore when she told the nurse to find the money in Terrence's wallet. It was a smile that didn't care about my health. It cared about control. I looked at the counter. It was covered with bags from an expensive organic market. Kale, quinoa, almond milk, things I did not eat, things I did not want. "I am 70 years old, Kimberly," I said. "I have been eating steak and eggs for 50 years. My heart is fine." "Your heart is weak," she corrected me. She walked over and patted my chest. It felt patronizing. It felt like she was patting a dog she was about to put down. "You are under a lot of stress, Reginald. Terrence is worried about you. We can't have you dropping dead of a heart attack while we are trying to nurse him back to health. Can we?" I looked at the trash can. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to get out of my house, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed them to think I was weak. I needed them to think I was submitting, so I swallowed my pride. It tasted like ash. "You are right," I said. I lowered my head and let my shoulders slump. "I just hate to see good food go to waste. It is not food." "Reginald," she said, tying up the trash bag, "it is garbage. And now it is gone. I will make us a nice vegetable soup for dinner. You will see. You will feel better in no time." I walked back to the living room. Terrence was sitting in his wheelchair by the window. He was watching me. His leg was propped up on the ottoman. He had a stack of papers in his lap. They looked like medical bills. "Hey, Dad," he said. He sounded tired. He sounded like a man carrying the weight of the world. It was a good performance. "Hey, son," I said. I sat back down in my recliner. I tried to look small. I tried to look frail. Terrence sighed and ruffled the papers. "These bills are insane, Dad. The ambulance ride alone was $2,000. The surgery, the ICU stay. My insurance is garbage. It is going to wipe us out." I watched him. I knew he was broke. I knew he had been stealing from me for 5 years, but I played along. "We will figure it out, son," I said. "We always do." "I don't know, Dad," he said, shaking his head. "I haven't been working much lately. The market is tough, and now with this injury I won't be able to work for months. Kimberly can't carry us both, and now we have to take care of you too." He paused. He was waiting for me to offer. He was waiting for me to open my checkbook, but I stayed silent. I wanted him to say it. I wanted him to show his hand. "We were thinking," he said slowly, "maybe it is time to liquidate some assets. Just the things that are sitting there doing nothing, like that old plot of land you have down in Georgia." I felt a spark of anger in my chest, hot and sharp. The land in Georgia. It was 50 acres of swamp and timber near the coast. I had inherited it from my grandfather. To the naked eye, it looked worthless, just mud and mosquitoes. Terrence hated it. He used to complain every time I dragged him down there to check the property lines. But Terrence didn't know what I knew. He didn't know that 5 years ago the state had rezoned that area. He didn't know that a major logistics company was planning to build a deep water port 3 miles away. He didn't know that the soil samples I had taken myself proved there were rare earth mineral deposits worth a fortune. That land wasn't just dirt, it was my retirement. It was the legacy I was going to leave to my grandchildren if I ever had any. It was worth $3 million conservatively. But to Terrence, it was just a quick $5,000 to pay off a bookie. "That land has been in the family for 100 years, Terrence." I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound like a sentimental old fool. "It is all I have left of my grandfather." "Dad, be realistic," Terrence snapped. His patience was fraying. "It is a swamp. Nobody wants it. But I know a guy who develops hunting leases. He might give us 20 grand for it. That would cover the immediate bills. It would take the pressure off. Do you want us to starve? Do you want Kimberly to work herself to death while you sit on a pile of mud? 20 grand. He was going to sell a $3 million asset for $20,000 because he was desperate. "I don't know, son," I said, rubbing my forehead. "I need to think about it. My head is foggy. I can't make decisions like that right now." Terrence looked at Kimberly, who was standing in the doorway wiping her hands on a towel. They exchanged a look. It was a look of frustration. They needed me to sign, and I wasn't signing fast enough. "Maybe you should rest, Dad," Terrence said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "You look pale. You are coughing a lot." I wasn't coughing. But as soon as he said it, I felt the opportunity. I let out a dry, raspy cough. I doubled over, clutching my chest. I made it sound wet and deep, like my lungs were filling with fluid. "Yeah," I wheezed. "I don't feel so good. My chest hurts." Kimberly was at my side in an instant. "Oh, poor Reginald," she cooed. "See, I told you. Your heart is weak. You need to relax. I am going to make you a special tea. It is an herbal blend. My mother used to make it. It helps with circulation and calms the nerves." She practically ran back to the kitchen. I watched her go. I saw her fill the kettle. I saw her reach into her purse, which was sitting on the counter. It wasn't the box of tea bags she reached for. I shifted in my chair, trying to get a better angle. The hallway mirror was angled just right. I could see into the kitchen if I leaned to the left. I saw Kimberly's reflection. She was standing with her back to me. She took a small white packet out of her purse. It looked like a sugar packet, but it wasn't branded. It was plain white paper. She tore the top off with her teeth. She poured the white powder into a mug. Then she poured the hot water over it. She stirred it vigorously. She added honey and lemon, probably to mask the taste. She threw the empty white packet into the trash can on top of my steaks. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This wasn't just bad food. This wasn't just financial pressure. This was chemistry. She walked back into the living room holding the mug with both hands. Steam rose from it, smelling of chamomile and something else. Something bitter and metallic. "Here you go, Reginald," she said, offering me the mug. "Drink this. All of it. It will make you sleep like a baby." I took the mug. It was warm in my hands. I looked at the liquid. It looked innocent. It looked like love. "Thank you, Kimberly," I said. "You are too good to me." I brought the mug to my lips. The smell hit me. Under the lemon, there was a chemical scent like crushed almonds. I knew that smell. I was an engineer. I knew about solvents and compounds. I pretended to take a sip. I let the liquid touch my lips, but I kept my teeth closed. I made a swallowing sound. "Is it good?" she asked, watching me intently. "It is delicious," I lied. "It is very soothing." "Good," she said. "Drink up. I have to go check on the laundry." She walked away, but she didn't go far. She stood in the hallway listening. She was waiting for the thud. She was waiting for the old man to collapse. I waited until she was out of sight. Terrence was busy on his phone texting someone, probably the shark, telling him the money was coming. He wasn't looking at me. I looked at the African violet on the side table. It was Althea's plant. She had nurtured it for 20 years. It had purple flowers that bloomed year-round. It was vibrant and alive. "I am sorry, Althea," I whispered. I poured the entire mug of tea into the soil of the plant. The dry earth sucked it up instantly. It vanished without a trace. I sat back in my chair and feigned drowsiness. I let my head loll to the side. I let my mouth hang open slightly. 10 minutes later, Kimberly came back. She saw the empty mug on the table. She saw me slumped in the chair. "Is he asleep?" she whispered to Terrence. "Yeah," Terrence said, not looking up. "He is out cold." "Good," she said. "That should keep him quiet until tomorrow. Did he say yes about the land?" "He is stalling," Terrence said. "But he is weak. He will break. If he doesn't, we will just forge his signature. Who is going to check? He is a nobody." I heard them laughing softly. I heard them turn off the lights. I heard them go into the guest room and shut the door. I stayed in that chair all night. I didn't dare move. I listened to the house settle. I listened to the wind outside. When the sun came up, I looked at the African violet. It was dead. Not just wilted. It was destroyed. The leaves were black and shriveled like they had been burned by fire. The purple flowers had turned to gray dust. The stems were collapsed. Whatever was in that white powder had killed a healthy plant in 6 hours. I stared at the dead plant and I felt a cold rage settle into my bones. It wasn't fear anymore. Fear is for people who don't know what is coming. I knew exactly what was coming. They weren't just invaders, they were exterminators. I reached out and touched one of the dead leaves. It crumbled to ash between my fingers. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Okay. You want a war. You want to see who breaks first. You think I am a feeble old man who needs a nap. You think I am a mark." I stood up. My back didn't hurt anymore. My hands didn't shake. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins like high-octane fuel. I picked up the dead plant. I walked to the kitchen and threw it in the trash on top of the steaks and the white packet. Then I went to the fridge. I took out the kale and the quinoa. I threw them in the trash too. I went to the cabinet where I kept my emergency stash. A box of Pop-Tarts, a jar of peanut butter. I ate. I fueled myself. Because the invasion was over. The occupation had begun, and the resistance started now. I needed to get out of the house. I needed to talk to Lewis. I needed to get that white packet out of the trash and into a lab. But as I turned to the back door, I saw something that made me stop. Kimberly had installed a new lock, a keypad deadbolt, and I didn't know the code. I went to the front door. Same thing. A new keypad. They hadn't just moved in, they had locked me in. I was a prisoner in my own home. I looked at the keypad. The numbers glowed red. "Reginald," she had said, "we are going to take such good care of you." I smiled. It was a grim smile. They thought they had locked me in with them, but they were wrong. They had locked themselves in with me. I woke up with the sun hitting my face, but the coldness in my chest had not thawed. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was the silence of a predator waiting in the tall grass. I knew I had to get out. I knew I had to see Lewis. But I also knew that the prison walls were closing in. I reached for my smartphone on the nightstand. I swiped the screen to check the time. That was when I saw it. A small icon in the top corner of the screen. A blue triangle. It was a location services icon. I had disabled that feature years ago because I did not like big tech companies tracking my movements to the hardware store. I opened the settings menu. My hands were steady now. The shock had worn off and the engineer in me had taken over. I scrolled down to the privacy tab. There was a new app installed. Family Guardian. It was a tracking app. It was designed for parents to track their children, or in this case for children to track their prey. Kimberly. She had installed it while I was sleeping. Or maybe she did it yesterday when she pretended to charge my phone because the battery was low. She wanted to know where I was every second of the day. If I went to the police station, she would know. If I went to the bank, she would know. If I went to meet a private investigator, she would know. I looked at the door. I could hear her downstairs rattling pots and pans, making a show of being the dutiful daughter-in-law. She was making noise to cover the sound of her listening. I needed to meet Lewis. He had found Miss Etta. The hospital had discharged her the same day I left. They transferred her to a state-run nursing facility on the south side. Lewis said she was lucid. He said she was ready to talk. But if I drove there with my phone, Kimberly would see the little blue dot moving across the city. She would call Terrence. They would intercept me. Or worse, they would get to Etta first. I needed a decoy. I got dressed slowly, putting on my old gardening clothes. I wanted to look like I was just going for a walk to clear my head. I put on my wide-brimmed hat and my sunglasses. I grabbed my cane even though I did not really need it. It added to the illusion of frailty. I walked downstairs. Kimberly was at the stove frying bacon. The smell made my stomach turn. "Good morning, Reginald," she said without turning around. "Sleep well. Like a baby," I lied. "I am going for a walk, just to the park down the street. I need some fresh air. The house is a little stuffy." She turned then. Her eyes scanned me. She looked at my pockets. She was checking to see if I had my phone. "Take your phone," she said, "just in case you fall or get confused. We need to be able to reach you." "Of course," I said, tapping my pocket. "Never leave home without it." I walked out the front door. The morning air was crisp. I walked slowly, shuffling my feet until I was out of sight of the kitchen window. Then I straightened my back and walked with purpose. The park was 3 blocks away. It was a small playground with a few benches and a basketball court. At this hour it was mostly empty except for a few joggers and a group of kids playing basketball before school. I walked over to the court. There was a boy sitting on the bench watching the game. He looked about 12 years old. He was wearing headphones and tapping his foot to music I could not hear. "Excuse me, young man," I said. He pulled one earbud out and looked at me suspiciously. "Yeah." I reached into my wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. I held it up. "I have a business proposition for you," I said. He looked at the money, then at me. "What kind of proposition?" "I need you to babysit my phone for an hour," I said. He frowned. "You want me to hold your phone?" I unlocked the screen and opened a game app. I handed him the phone and the $20. "I want you to sit here and play this game," I said, "or walk around the park. Just stay in the park. Do not leave the park. In 1 hour I will come back for it. If it is still here, I will give you another 20. The kid smiled. It was the smile of someone who just won the lottery. "Deal old school." I handed him the device. I watched as the GPS signal locked onto his location. To Kimberly, watching her screen back at the house, it would look like I was sitting on a park bench feeding the pigeons. It would look like I was exactly where I said I would be. I walked to the other side of the park. A gray sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Detective Lewis was behind the wheel. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Get in, Reggie," he said. "We do not have much time." I got in. The car smelled of stale coffee and old leather. Lewis pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic. He drove fast but smooth. He knew the city like the back of his hand. "She is at the Shady Grove facility," Lewis said. "It is not a nice place, Reggie. It is where they put people who have no money and no family. It is a warehouse for the dying." "Why did they move her so fast?" I asked. "She was still recovering. Bed space," Lewis said grimly. "And maybe someone paid to have her moved. Someone who wanted her out of the way." I looked at him. "You think Terrence did that?" "I think your son covers his tracks," Lewis said. "He saw you talking to her. He saw you bringing her food. He got paranoid. He wanted her gone." We pulled up to the nursing home 20 minutes later. It was a brick building with barred windows and peeling paint. There were people sitting in wheelchairs on the porch staring at nothing. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. We signed in at the front desk. Lewis flashed his retired badge and the receptionist did not ask any questions. She just pointed us down a long hallway. "Room 304, she said without looking up. We walked down the hall. I heard moans and coughing coming from the open doors. It broke my heart. These people had lives once. They had families. Now they were just numbers in a file. We found room 304. It was a small room with 2 beds. One was empty. In the other lay Ms. Etta. She looked smaller than she had in the hospital. She was curled up on her side facing the wall. She was wearing a faded hospital gown. "Ms. Etta," I whispered. She stiffened, but she did not turn around. "It is Reginald King," I said. "The man from the hospital. I brought you some soup." Slowly she rolled over. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Then she looked at Lewis. "He is a friend," I said. "He is a police officer. He is here to help." She sat up. Her hands were shaking. "You came," she said. "I did not think you would come. They told me you were dead." "Who told you that?" I asked, feeling a spike of anger. "The man who moved me," she said. "He said Mr. King had a heart attack. He said I should not wait for him. Lies. All lies to keep us apart." "I am very much alive, Etta," I said, taking her hand, "and I need your help. I need you to tell my friend what you told me, about the phone call, about the accident." She looked at Lewis. He nodded encouragingly. "Just tell the truth, ma'am," he said. "That is all we need." Etta took a deep breath. She looked at the door as if expecting Kimberly to burst in. "It was the day before the crash," she said. "Your son Terrence came to the hospital for a checkup. He had a cast on his wrist from a tennis injury or something. He was walking down the hallway. He stopped right outside my room to use the vending machine." "Go on," I said. "He made a call," she continued. "He did not see me. I was sitting in my wheelchair in the doorway waiting for the nurse. He was loud. He was angry." "Who was he talking to?" Lewis asked, taking out a notepad. "I do not know the name," she said. "But he was scared of them. He was pleading. He said, 'Please just give me 48 hours. And then what happened?" I asked. "Then his voice changed," she said. "He started laughing. It was a bad laugh, Mr. King. A cruel laugh. He said, 'Do not worry about the money. The old man trusts me completely. He thinks I am borrowing the truck to move furniture. He has no idea I cut the lines. Tomorrow night he is going fishing. And by midnight I will be $2.5 million richer.'" I closed my eyes. Hearing it from her lips was like being stabbed in the heart again. It was premeditated. It was cold-blooded. He had stood in a hospital hallway and laughed about my death. He said the old man believes anything, Etta whispered. He said you were a fool. I squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Etta. You have no idea how much this helps." Lewis flipped his notepad closed. "That is intent," he said. "That is motive. That is everything we need." We stood up to leave. Etta grabbed my hand again. "Be careful, Mr. King," she said. "He has eyes everywhere, even here." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "The nurse," she said. "The one who brought me here. She was texting someone. She took a picture of me. I heard her say the package is delivered." I looked at Lewis. He looked back at me. His face was grim. "We need to go, Reggie," he said. "Now." We left the nursing home fast. Lewis drove me back to the park. I checked my watch. I had been gone 50 minutes. The kid was still there sitting on the bench playing the game. "Here you go, sir," he said, handing me the phone. "I beat your high score." I handed him another 20. "Thank you, son. You did a great job." I walked back to my house. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was harder than steel. I had the witness. I had the evidence. Now I just needed to survive long enough to use it. I walked up the driveway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I unlocked the front door. The living room was empty. Kimberly, I called out. No answer. I walked into the kitchen. Empty. I walked down the hall to my bedroom. The door was open. I stepped inside and stopped. Kimberly was standing in the middle of the room. She had pulled the drawers out of my dresser. Clothes were scattered everywhere. She had flipped the mattress. The room was tossed. She turned to face me. She did not look guilty. She looked triumphant. In her hand, she held a small black book. It was bound in leather. It was old and worn. It was my ledger. Not the fake one I kept in the filing cabinet with the modest pension numbers. This was the real one. The one that listed the patent royalties. The one that listed the offshore accounts. The one that listed the real estate holdings in Dubai and London. The one that proved I was worth $52 million. She opened the book. She ran her finger down a column of numbers. Her eyes were wide. Her mouth was open in a rictus of greed. "Reginald," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "What is this?" I stood in the doorway. I did not move. I did not speak. She looked up at me. Her face changed. The disdain was gone. The annoyance was gone. In its place was something much more dangerous. Hunger. "You are not poor," she said. "You never were." She looked at the total at the bottom of the page. 52 million, she breathed. She closed the book and clutched it to her chest. She looked at me, and for the first time since I met her, she smiled a real smile. "Well, Reginald," she said, "I guess we need to have a talk." I looked at her. I looked at the book in her hands. "No, Kimberly," I said. "We are done talking." But as I said it, I knew the game had changed. They weren't just trying to kill me for insurance money anymore, they were trying to kill me for an empire. And they would not stop until they had every last cent. Kimberly stared at the leather-bound ledger in her hands as if it were a holy relic. Her fingers traced the spine, her eyes wide and unblinking. The disdain she usually wore like armor had vanished, replaced by a raw, terrifying hunger. She looked from the pages to me, and for a second I thought she might embrace me, not out of affection, but out of the sheer overwhelming realization of what I was worth. 52 million. She breathed, the number hanging in the air like smoke. She looked back down at the rows of entries. She squinted, her brow furrowing. I saw the moment the realization hit her. She could see the totals, but she couldn't read the details. I had used an alphanumeric coding system I developed 40 years ago for cataloging structural stress points in high-rise foundations. To her, it was just a list of gibberish codes and massive dollar signs. She had the map to the treasure, but she didn't have the key. "What are these accounts, Reginald?" she demanded, her voice tight. "Where is this money held?" I stood in the doorway of my tossed bedroom, my face a mask of stone. "I told you, Kimberly, we are done talking." She glared at me, her knuckles white on the book. She realized she couldn't beat the information out of me. If I died or if I refused to speak, the money would remain locked in offshore trusts, inaccessible forever. She needed me. She needed my mind, or at least my signature, while I was still legally competent enough to sign it all away. She snapped the book shut and tucked it under her arm like a weapon. "Stay here," she hissed. "Do not leave this room." She turned and marched out, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. I waited 3 seconds, then moved silently to the hallway. I needed to hear this. I needed to know the new rules of engagement. I pressed my ear against the door of the guest room. Their voices were low, but the urgency carried through the wood. "We can't just kill him, Terry," Kimberly was saying, her voice pitching up in panic. "Did you see those numbers, $52 million? He has properties in Dubai. He has patent royalties coming in every month. The insurance policy is peanuts compared to this." "So we force him to sign it over," Terrence said. "Break his fingers until he gives us the codes." "No," she snapped. "Use your brain. The police are already sniffing around the truck. That detective friend of his has the vehicle. If Reginald shows up dead now or with broken fingers, we go to prison for murder. And if he dies without transferring the assets, it all goes into probate or gets locked in some trust we can't touch. We lose everything." "Then what do we do?" Terrence asked, sounding desperate. "He knows Kim. He knows we tried to kill him." "We changed the narrative," she said. Her voice dropped, becoming cold and clinical. "We don't need him dead. We need him incompetent." "Incompetent. Conservatorship," she said. The word hit me like a physical blow. "Like they do with senile old people. We get a doctor to declare that he's lost his mind, that the accident traumatized him, that he's suffering from dementia. Once we have legal guardianship, we control everything. His accounts, his properties, his decisions. We become him." "But he's not crazy," Terrence said. "He's sharp as a tack. He tricked us with the phone this morning." "He's 70 years old," Kimberly said dismissively. "Everyone expects him to slip. We just have to help him along. We have to make him doubt his own reality. We have to make him look crazy to the neighbors, to the doctors, to the police. We break his mind, Terrence, and then we take the empire." I stepped back from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Gaslighting. They were going to dismantle my sanity brick by brick until I was nothing but a confused old man begging for their help. It was a fate worse than death. I retreated to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I needed a plan. I needed to beat them at their own game. The psychological warfare began an hour later. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. The table was set for lunch. There were 3 plates. "Sit down, Reginald," Kimberly said. She was smiling again, that nurse in an asylum smile. "I made tuna melts." I sat down. I hate tuna. I have hated tuna since the war. "I don't eat tuna, Kimberly," I said quietly. She frowned, looking genuinely concerned. "Of course you do, Reginald. You asked for it this morning. You said, 'Kimberly, I have such a craving for a tuna melt.' Don't you remember?" I stared at her. "I never said that." "Oh, Dad," Terrence said, shaking his head from across the table. "You definitely did. You went on and on about it. You said Mom used to make them." Althea never made tuna melts. She knew I despised them. "Eat up," Kimberly said, pushing the plate toward me. "It's good for your brain." I didn't eat it. I drank the water and went to the living room. I reached for the remote to turn on the news. The remote wasn't on the side table where I always left it. "Where is the remote?" I asked. "You put it in the refrigerator, Dad," Terrence said, not looking up from his phone. "I did not," I said. "Go check." I walked to the kitchen. I opened the fridge. There, sitting on the middle shelf next to the almond milk, was the remote control. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I knew I hadn't put it there, but seeing it there misplaced so bizarrely made my stomach lurch. This was how they were going to do it. Little things, constant things, until I questioned my own hands. The afternoon was a blur of calculated torments. I went to the bathroom, and when I came out, the hallway clock had been moved to the opposite wall. When I asked about it, they claimed it had always been there. I went to read my book, but my reading glasses were gone. I found them later in the trash can, broken. Kimberly told me I had stepped on them and thrown them away in a rage. By evening, I was exhausted. My mind was racing, trying to catalog every change, every lie. I felt like I was walking on quicksand. I sat in my recliner, my hands gripping the armrests. Terrence and Kimberly were on the sofa, whispering and looking at me. They were waiting for me to crack. They were waiting for the outburst that they could record and show to a judge. I couldn't give it to them. I had to play the part they wanted, but on my terms. I let my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I started to tremble, vibrating my hands against the leather of the chair. I made my breathing shallow and fast. I stammered. "I don't feel right." Kimberly sat up straight, her eyes gleaming. "What is it, Reginald? Are you confused again?" "I don't know," I whispered, looking around the room with wide, frightened eyes. "I feel lost. I thought it was morning. Is it night?" "It's night, Reginald," she said soothingly. "It's okay. You're just tired. I patted my pockets frantically. "I need my wallet. I had it. I had it right here." I stood up, wobbling on my feet. "Where is my wallet? I can't find my wallet. Someone took it." Terrence looked at Kimberly. He grinned. It was a wolfish, triumphant grin. They thought the drugs or the stress finally broke me. They thought the rat was running in circles. "Your wallet?" Kimberly asked, standing up. "The one with your ID and your bank cards?" "Yes." I cried, my voice rising in fake panic. "I need it. I don't know who I am without it." "Don't worry, Dad," Terrence said, standing up. "We'll find it. We'll turn the house upside down if we have to." "Sit down, Reginald," Kimberly said, guiding me back to the chair. "Let us take care of it. We'll find everything." They scattered. They started tearing through the house, opening drawers, looking under cushions. They weren't looking to help me. They were looking for the plastic and the leather that would give them access to my life. I watched them through half-closed eyes. I watched them search. They wouldn't find it. My wallet was taped inside the air return vent in the ceiling of the hallway. And my cash. My cash was in a waterproof bag inside the toilet tank of the guest bathroom. I let out a low moan of distress just to keep them motivated. "Please," I whimpered. "Please help me." "We are Reginald," Kimberly called out from my bedroom, the sound of drawers being ripped open echoing down the hall. "We are helping you." I closed my eyes and let a single real tear roll down my cheek. Not from fear, from hate. Let them hunt. While they looked for my wallet, I was counting the hours until Friday. Friday was the day I would sign their papers. Friday was the day I would invite them to the table. And Friday was the day I would eat them alive. The smell of roast beef filled the dining room, but to me it smelled like a trap. Kimberly had set the table with my good china, the porcelain plates with the gold rim that Althea had bought for our 25th anniversary. She had lit candles. She had even ironed the tablecloth. It was a stage set for a play, and I knew exactly what role I was expected to play. The senile old fool. Tonight we had a guest. Terrence had introduced him as Dr. Vance, a specialist in geriatric care. He was a man in his 50s with dyed black hair, a suit that was a little too shiny, and a smile that looked like it had been bought at a discount dental clinic. I shook his hand. It was damp. I did not need a background check to know this man was not a reputable doctor. He had the nervous energy of a man who had lost his license years ago and was now making money doing dirty work for desperate people. "Please sit, Reginald," Dr. Vance said, pulling out my chair for me. "We just want to have a nice chat, get to know you better. Terrence tells me you have been having some memory issues lately." I sat down. I let my hand tremble as I reached for my water glass. I spilled a little on the tablecloth. Kimberly sighed loudly, a sound of long-suffering patience designed to show the doctor how difficult I was. "I am fine," I mumbled, keeping my head down. "Just a little tired." "Of course," Dr. Vance said, sitting across from me. "Trauma takes a toll on the mind. Let us just eat and talk. No pressure." Dinner was a tense affair. Terrence sat at the head of the table, my seat, eating aggressively. He did not look at me. He looked at the doctor, waiting for the verdict. Kimberly hovered, refilling wine glasses, playing the perfect hostess, while watching me like a hawk. So Reginald Dr. Vance began cutting his meat into precise squares. "Let us do a little exercise, just for fun. Can you tell me what year it is?" I looked up at him. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I blinked slowly. "It is 2024, I said. "Very good," he said, his tone patronizing. "And can you tell me who the president is?" I answered him. Then I added, "And the vice president is Harris. And the governor of this state was elected 3 years ago on a platform of infrastructure reform which he has failed to deliver because he does not understand that you cannot patch a suspension bridge with asphalt." Dr. Vance paused his fork halfway to his mouth. He blinked. "That is very detailed, Reginald." I read the paper, I said. I dipped a piece of bread into my gravy, making a mess. My hands are shaky, not my brain. He cleared his throat and exchanged a glance with Kimberly. She narrowed her eyes. She wanted him to push harder. "Let us try something else," Dr. Vance said. "Suppose you have $100. You give 20 to your son and you spend 30 on groceries. How much do you have left?" I looked at Terrence. He was wearing a new watch, a Rolex. It was fake, I could tell by the sweep of the second hand, but he thought it made him look rich. "I have $50 left," I said. "But if I give $20 to my son, I will never see it again. And if I spend 30 on groceries, my daughter-in-law will throw them in the trash because she says they are unhealthy. So in reality, I have $0 and a hungry stomach." Terrence slammed his fork down. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "Dad, stop it. Just answer the questions properly." "I am answering, son," I said, my voice trembling with fake fear. "I am just doing the math." "I was an engineer, Terrence. Math is about variables. You are a variable, a negative variable." Dr. Vance chuckled nervously. "He is quite spirited, isn't he? But, Reginald, let us talk about your house. Do you know where you live?" "I live at 424 Oak Street," I said. "This house was built in 1958. The foundation is reinforced concrete. The load-bearing walls are 16 inches apart. The roof was replaced in 98. I know every nail in this house, doctor. I know where the pipes run. I know where the wires are. I know where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, of course." I stared at him. For a second, the fog in my eyes cleared, and I let him see the steel underneath. I let him see the man who had fired incompetent contractors on million-dollar job sites. I let him see that he was out of his depth. Dr. Vance shifted in his chair. He loosened his tie. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his forehead. "Well," he said, looking at Terrence, "he seems oriented to time and place. His cognitive functions are surprisingly sharp for his age." "That is not what we pay you for," Terrence hissed. Kimberly kicked Terrence under the table. The doctor jumped. "What Terrence means," Dr. Vance said quickly, recovering his composure, "is that sometimes people can mask their confusion. They can memorize facts, but they lose the ability to make complex decisions. Decisions about finance. Decisions about safety." He reached into his briefcase, which was sitting on the floor, and pulled out a thick document. "We feel it would be best if you had some help, Reginald," he said, sliding the papers across the table toward me. "This is just a formality. It is a power of attorney. It assigns your son as your legal guardian. It means he can handle the bills and the stress so you can just relax." I looked at the document. It was thick. It was comprehensive. It gave Terrence control over everything. My bank accounts, my medical decisions, my real estate, my life. If I signed this, I ceased to exist as a legal person. I became a piece of property. I picked up the document. My hands shook so much the paper rattled. "I do not know," I whispered. "I do not like signing things I have not read." "You do not need to read it," Dad Terrence said, leaning forward. His face was red. His patience was gone. "It just says we love you. It just says we are going to take care of you. It says you get the house," I said, pointing to a paragraph on the second page. "It says you get the accounts." "It is for your own good," Kimberly snapped. "You are old Reginald. You are putting tea in plant pots. You are wandering off to parks. You are not safe." I looked at Dr. Vance. "Is this your medical opinion, doctor? That I am incompetent?" Dr. Vance looked at the check Terrence had probably already written him. He looked at my shaking hands. He made a choice. "Yes, Reginald," he said. "In my professional opinion, you are suffering from early-stage dementia. You need a guardian. If you do not sign this, your family will have to petition the court. It will be public. It will be embarrassing. They will testify about your behavior. You will end up in a state facility. This way, you get to stay home." It was a threat wrapped in a diagnosis. "Sign or we lock you away." I looked at Terrence. I saw the greed in his eyes. He was desperate. The shark was probably calling him every hour. He needed access to my money, and he needed it now. I looked at Kimberly. She was smiling that shark smile. She thought she had won. I needed to buy time. Lewis needed until Friday to get the forensic report on the brake lines. My lawyer needed until Friday to set up the trust trap. I needed 3 more days. If I refused to sign now, they might kill me tonight. They might decide the slow way was too risky and just smother me with a pillow. I had to give them a win. But I had to do it on my terms. I dropped the paper on the table. I buried my face in my hands. I let out a long, shuddering sob. "I am so tired," I wailed. "I am just so tired. I do not want to fight anymore." Terrence softened. He thought I was breaking. "Just sign it, Dad. It will be over." I looked up. Tears were running down my face. I can produce tears on command. It is a trick I learned to get out of speeding tickets in my 30s. "Okay," I whispered. "You win. I will sign." Kimberly clapped her hands together. "Oh, Reginald, that is wonderful. Do you have a pen?" "Wait," I said, raising a hand. "Not now. Not like this." "What do you mean, not like this?" Terrence demanded. "Sign the paper, old man. Do not make this difficult. This is a big moment," I said, my voice gaining a little strength. "Handing over my life. My legacy. I want to do it right. I want to do it with dignity." "What do you want, Dad?" Terrence asked through gritted teeth. "I want a ceremony," I said. "On Friday. Friday is my birthday. Did you forget?" They froze. Of course they had forgotten. They did not care about my birthday. "I turned 71 on Friday," I said. "I want a dinner, a real celebration. I want to invite a few friends. I want to sign the papers then, like a passing of the torch, from father to son." Terrence looked at Kimberly. "Can we wait until Friday?" he whispered. The doctor leaned in. "It might be better," he said quietly. "If he signs it in front of witnesses at a celebration, it looks voluntary. It makes it bulletproof in court. If he signs it tonight under duress, a judge might throw it out later." Kimberly did the math in her head. "Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 2 days. Fine," she said. "Friday. We will have a party. We will invite the neighbors. We will show everyone what a happy family we are. And then you sign. And then I sign. I agreed. Everything. The house, the accounts, the patent royalties." "Patent royalties?" Terrence asked, his ears perking up. "Oh yes," I said casually. "I never told you about those, did I? The structural dampeners I invented in '82. They are still used in skyscrapers in Tokyo. The checks come in every quarter. It is not much, but it adds up." I saw the dollar signs spinning in his eyes. He had no idea. He thought he was getting crumbs, and now he thought he was getting the whole bakery. "Friday," he said. "Friday we do it." He grabbed the wine bottle and poured himself a full glass. He toasted the doctor. To family, he said. To family, I repeated, raising my water glass. I looked at the condensation dripping down the side of the glass. I looked at the distorted reflection of my son's face through the water. He looked like a monster. Friday, I thought. Friday, you are going to have a party, son. And I am going to be the one blowing out the candles. But first I have to survive until then, because now they have a date. And if I die before Friday, they lose the signature. But if I live until Friday and sign, they win everything. They would keep me alive now. They would wrap me in cotton wool. They would guard me like the crown jewels. I took a sip of water. It tasted sweet. It tasted like victory. Let the countdown begin. Wednesday morning arrived with a silence that felt heavy and suffocating. The house was no longer my sanctuary. It was a holding cell. I sat in my recliner watching the dust motes dance in the sunlight. I was waiting for the next move. I knew it was coming. Kimberly walked into the room. She was holding a wicker basket. She smiled that plastic smile that made my skin crawl. "Good morning, Dad," she said. Her voice was bright and chirpy. "We have been thinking. The doctor said you need absolute rest, no stress, no distractions. And we noticed you have been staring at your phone a lot lately. It is not healthy. The blue light is bad for your sleep cycles." She held out her hand. It was not a request. It was a command wrapped in a favor. "We think it is best if you do a digital detox until the party," she said, "just for a few days, to clear your mind. We do not want you getting agitated by the news or confused by spam calls." I looked at her hand. I looked at my phone sitting on the side table. It was my lifeline. It was my connection to Lewis and the outside world. If I handed it over, I was officially cut off. If I refused, she would take it by force, or worse, she would call Dr. Vance and say I was becoming aggressive. I had to play the part. I had to be the submissive, confused old man. "You are right, Kimberly," I said. My voice sounded weak and defeated. "The screen hurts my eyes anyway. I do not know how to use half the apps. It is all just noise." I picked up the phone, I unlocked it one last time and discreetly turned the volume all the way up so she would hear notifications she could not unlock. Then I handed it to her. She snatched it like a trophy. "Excellent choice, Reginald. We will keep it safe for you. If anyone calls, we will take a message. Now why don't you take a nap? You have a big day on Friday." She walked out of the room humming. I heard her lock the phone in the drawer of the hallway console table. She took the key. I waited. I counted the seconds. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. I heard the back door open and close. I heard Terrence's voice in the backyard complaining about the heat. I heard Kimberly turn on the dishwasher in the kitchen. They thought I was helpless. They thought they had severed my communication lines. They thought I was an old engineer who had been left behind by technology. They forgot that I was an engineer who built things to last. I stood up. I walked silently to the hallway closet. It was where we kept the linens and the old vacuum cleaner. I opened the door and knelt down. I pushed aside a stack of old towels. At the back of the closet there was a small access panel for the central heating system. It was screwed shut. To the naked eye it looked like it hadn't been opened in 20 years. The paint was thick over the screws. But I knew the secret. The screws were fake heads glued onto a magnetic plate. I pressed my thumb against the bottom right corner of the panel. It clicked softly and popped open. Inside, nestled in a bed of fiberglass insulation, was a small waterproof box. I pulled it out. My hands were steady. I opened the latch. Sitting inside was a Nokia 3310, a brick phone. I had bought it 15 years ago as a catastrophic emergency backup. It was fully charged. I charged it once a month religiously. Next to it was a prepaid SIM card I replaced every year. I popped the SIM card in. The screen lit up with a green glow. The battery was full. It connected to the network instantly. No GPS, no apps, no tracking software. Just a simple signal that Kimberly and her fancy spy apps couldn't see. I dialed a number I had memorized a decade ago. It was a direct line. It didn't go to a secretary. It didn't go to voicemail. It rang twice. "This is Anderson," a voice said. It was deep and gravelly. The voice of a man who charged $1,000 an hour and was worth every penny. "Mr. Anderson," I said, "it is Reginald King. Code Black." There was a pause, the sound of a chair shifting. The tone of his voice changed from professional to alert. "Reginald, I haven't heard that code since the patent wars of '98. Where are you?" "I am in my house," I said. "I am being held against my will. My communications have been compromised. I am speaking to you on a burner." "Do you need extraction?" Anderson asked. I can have a private security team at your door in 20 minutes. We can break the door down. No, I whispered. Not yet. I need them to think they are winning. They have a plan, Anderson. They have forged a power of attorney. They have forged a will. They have a fake doctor ready to declare me incompetent. They want me to sign everything over to them on Friday. My birthday. Friday, Anderson repeated. That is 3 days. Yes, I said. I need you to prepare the trap protocol. The trust trap, Anderson asked. The trust trap, I confirmed. I heard the sound of him typing furiously on a keyboard. Reginald, are you sure? Anderson asked. Once we execute this, there is no going back. It will expose everything. The accounts, the holdings, the shell companies. Your family will know exactly who you are. They already know, I said. They found the ledger. They know the total, 52 million. They know about the money, Anderson said. But do they know where it comes from? No, I said. They think I am just a lucky investor. They have no idea about the dampeners. Good, Anderson said. Let us keep it that way until the ink is dry. I leaned back against the wall of the closet, clutching the small phone. I thought about the dampeners, the seismic isolation joint. I invented it 40 years ago in a small garage in Detroit. It was a system of hydraulic pistons and rubber bearings designed to let skyscrapers sway during an earthquake without snapping. Everyone said it wouldn't work. Everyone said I was crazy. But then the Kobe earthquake hit Japan. The only building in the district that didn't suffer structural damage was the one using my prototype. After that, the orders didn't stop. Every major skyline in the world had my DNA in it. Tokyo, San Francisco, Dubai. Every time the wind blew hard or the earth shook, my bank account grew. I had built an empire on the principle of absorbing shock. I had built a fortune on the idea that if you are flexible enough, you cannot be broken. Now I had to become the dampener. I had to absorb the shock of my son's betrayal without breaking. Anderson, I said, I need you to draft a new trust, a specific one. It needs to look exactly like the document they are going to present to me, but the beneficiary clause needs to be different. Tell me, Anderson said. The beneficiary must be the Reginald King Foundation for Engineering Excellence, I said, and there needs to be a poison pill clause. If I die under suspicious circumstances, or if I am declared incompetent by anyone other than a board of 3 state-appointed psychiatrists, the assets freeze for 50 years. That is aggressive, Anderson said. It will lock them out completely. Even if they kill you, they get nothing. That is the point, I said, and I need you to be here. On Friday, at 6 p.m., bring the sheriff. Bring the papers. I will be there, Reginald Anderson said. Stay safe, old friend. Do not eat anything they give you. Do not sign anything until I walk through that door. I hung up. I pulled the battery out of the phone. I put it back in the waterproof box. I put the box back in the wall. I snapped the panel shut. I stood up and arranged the towels back over the spot. I checked the hallway. It was empty. I walked back to the living room and sat down. My heart was beating slow and strong. The pieces were moving. The trap was set. But then I heard it. A voice. It was coming from the back porch. The window was open just a crack to let in the breeze. I stood up and moved closer to the window, keeping my body hidden behind the heavy drapes. It was Terrence. He was on his phone. Please listen to me, he was saying. His voice was high and tight. It sounded like a wire pulled until it was about to snap. I stayed frozen. I needed to hear the other side of the conversation, but I couldn't. I could only hear my son. I know I missed the payment, he said. I know. But the plan changed. The accident didn't work. He is tougher than he looks. He paused, listening. No, do not come here, Terrence pleaded. There are neighbors. It is too risky. Just give me until Friday. Friday is the day. We are having a party. He is going to sign everything over. He listened again. He was sweating. I could hear the fear in his breathing. Yes, 2.5 million is just the start, he said. He has more. Millions more. We found the book. I will pay you double. I will pay you triple. Just keep your guys away from me. He paused. The silence stretched out. I swear, Terrence hissed. Friday night. As soon as the ink is wet, I will transfer the first installment. And if he hesitates, if he tries to play games, I will end it right there. I leaned closer to the window, holding my breath. I will choke the life out of him right at the birthday table, Terrence whispered. I do not care who is watching. I do not care about the police. I am not going down for this. If he does not sign, he dies. Friday night. Guaranteed. He hung up. I heard him take a long, shaky breath. I heard the click of a lighter and the smell of cigarette smoke drifted in through the window. I backed away slowly. My feet made no sound on the carpet. I went back to my recliner and sat down. I stared at the blank television screen. Strangled. He was going to strangle me. My son. The boy I held when he had nightmares, the boy I taught to fish. He wasn't just a thief, he wasn't just a liar, he was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are the most dangerous creatures on earth. Friday wasn't just a deadline, it was an execution date. The shark wasn't just threatening him anymore, the shark was coming for him. And Terrence was going to throw me to the wolves to save himself. I looked at my hands. They were old hands, liver spots, veins like blue ropes, but they were strong hands. They were hands that had bent steel and poured concrete. They were hands that had built a life. And they were hands that were going to have to destroy one. Friday, I thought. Friday, you want to put your hands on my throat, son. You better be ready. Because I have faced earthquakes that leveled cities. I have faced typhoons that stripped the bark off trees. You are just a crack in the foundation. And I know how to fix cracks. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I needed to conserve my energy. I needed to be ready, because when Friday came, only one of us was going to walk away from that table. Thursday night settled over the house like a shroud. The air was thick with the humidity of the coming storm and the suffocating weight of the lies that filled every room. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the shadows. My breathing was shallow and rhythmic. I had practiced this. I had spent 40 years on construction sites learning how to be still while chaos erupted around me. I knew how to wait. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:14 in the morning. The house should have been asleep. But evil does not sleep. Evil paces. Evil drinks. Evil plans. I heard the creak of the floorboards in the hallway. It was a specific creak, the third board from the bathroom door. I knew every sound this house made because I had built half of it with my own hands. I closed my eyes. I closed. I let my jaw go slack. I slowed my heart rate down. I became a statue of a sleeping old man. The door to my bedroom opened. It did not open quietly. It swung wide, hitting the doorstop with a dull thud. The smell hit me first. Cheap scotch and stale cigarette smoke. It was the smell of desperation. Then came the sound. The soft whir of rubber tires on hardwood. Terrence. He rolled his wheelchair into the room. I could hear his labored breathing. He was in pain from the accident, but the alcohol was dulling it. He stopped beside my bed. I could feel his eyes on me. They were heavy and hot. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. It was the heat of a man burning up with resentment. He sat there for a long time, just watching me, breathing, drinking. I heard the ice clink in his glass. "Are you asleep, old man?" he whispered. I did not move. I did not twitch. I kept my rhythm perfect. In inhale, out exhale. "Good," he said. His voice was thick and slurred. "Sleep. Get your rest. You are going to need it." He took a sip of his drink. He leaned forward. I could smell the alcohol on his breath. It washed over my face like a toxic wave. "You look so peaceful," he sneered. "You always look peaceful. Even when the world is burning down, you just sit there like a statue, like a saint, Saint Reginald. The man who can do no wrong, the man who fixes everything." He laughed. It was a low, bitter sound that scraped against the silence. "Do you know how exhausting it is to be your son?" he asked the darkness. "Do you have any idea what it is like to live in your shadow? It is cold there, Reginald. It is so cold." He reached out and poked my shoulder. It was not a gentle touch. It was a prod, like you would poke a dead animal on the side of the road to see if it was still breathing. "I hated you for years," he hissed. "I hated you when you bought me my first car because it was not the one I wanted. I hated you when you paid for my college because you expected me to actually study. I hated you when you bailed me out of jail that first time because you looked at me with those sad, disappointed eyes." He leaned closer. His lips were inches from my ear. "Do you know why I really hate you, Dad? Do you want to know the truth?" I lay there paralyzed by the venom in his voice. I wanted to cover my ears. I wanted to shout at him to get out, but I needed to hear this. I needed to know the depth of the rot. "I hate you because you are too perfect," he whispered. "You are too good. You saved me from the orphanage. You picked me out of a lineup of broken kids. You brought me home and gave me a room and toys and a name, but you never let me forget it. Not with words. You never said it, but it was in your eyes. Every time I failed, every time I lied, every time I stole, you looked at me like I was a failed project. He took another drink. He slammed the glass down on my nightstand. You looked at me like a bridge that collapsed, he said. You looked at me like a structural flaw that you could not engineer away. You thought you could fix me with love and patience and money, but you cannot fix what is rotten, Reginald. You can only bury it. I felt a tear leak from the corner of my eye. It slid down my temple into my hair. I hoped it was too dark for him to see. He was right. I had looked at him with disappointment. But not because he was a failed project. Because I knew he could be better. I knew he had a good heart buried under all that pain. Or at least I thought he did. Now I knew I was wrong. There was no heart. There was only a void where a heart should be. You think you are so smart, Terence continued. You think you have it all figured out. You think Friday is going to be a celebration. A passing of the torch. He chuckled. It was a wet, ugly sound. Tomorrow is not a celebration, old man. It is a funeral. Your funeral. Not your body. Your body will keep breathing. But your life is over. He leaned in so close his whiskers brushed my cheek. Tomorrow night, after you sign those papers, I am not going to take care of you. I am not going to hire nurses. I am not going to keep you in this house. He paused, savoring the cruelty. I found a place for you, he whispered. It is called Shady Acres. It is state-funded. It is cheap. It smells like urine and bleach and boiled cabbage. They strap the patients to the bed so they do not wander. They medicate them until they drool. That is where you are going, Reginald. My heart hammered against my ribs. He wasn't just going to take my money. He was going to throw me into a dungeon to rot. I am going to drop you off at the door, he said. And I am going to drive away in my new car bought with your money. And I am never going to look back. I am going to enjoy your money, Dad. I am going to burn through it. I am going to buy things you would hate. I am going to gamble. I am going to travel. And every time I spend $1, I'm going to laugh, because I know you are sitting in your own filth wondering where you went wrong. He pulled back. He picked up his glass. So sleep tight, he said. Enjoy your last night in a comfortable bed. Enjoy your last night as a man, because tomorrow you become a vegetable. He downed the rest of his drink. He wheeled his chair around. He paused at the door. You should have just died in the crash, he said. It would have been cleaner. You would have died thinking I loved you. Now you are going to die knowing I despise you. And that is my real birthday gift to you. He rolled out of the room. The door swung shut but didn't latch. I heard his wheels squeak down the hallway. I heard him go into the kitchen and pour another drink. I lay in the dark. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was not empty. It was filled with the echoes of his words. Failed project. Rotten. Despise. I felt the tears running freely now. They were hot and stinging. I cried for the little boy with the big eyes I had met 36 years ago. I cried for the toddler who used to fall asleep on my chest. I cried for the teenager I taught to shave. I cried for my wife Althea. I thanked God she was not here to hear this. It would have killed her. It would have broken her heart into dust. But as the tears dried, a coldness settled over me. It started in my chest and spread to my limbs. It was the coldness of absolute clarity. Terence was right. He was a failed project. But the failure was not in the engineering. The failure was in the foundation. The material was flawed from the start. I had spent my life building things that could withstand hurricanes and earthquakes. I built things to protect people. But sometimes you encounter a structure that is so compromised, so dangerous, that there is only one solution: demolition. You do not patch it. You do not shore it up. You bring it down. Controlled. Precise. Total. I sat up in bed. I wiped my face with the sheet. I was done crying. The father in me had just died in this room. Terence had killed him with his words. What was left was the engineer. The man who dealt in physics and consequences. The man who knew that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Terence wanted to put me in a cage. He wanted to strip me of my dignity and my legacy. He wanted to erase me. He had made a fatal calculation error. He assumed my silence was weakness. He assumed my love was a blindfold. I looked at the clock. 4 a.m. The sun would be up in 2 hours. Friday. My birthday. The day of the party. I swung my legs out of bed. I stood up. My joints popped. My back ached, but I felt strong. Stronger than I had felt in years. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. The shadows were deep and long. "You want a monster, son," I whispered to the glass. "You want a villain. Fine, I will be the villain." I turned away from the window. I walked to the closet. I opened the hidden panel one last time. I took out the burner phone. I sent one text message to Anderson. Proceed. Then I went back to bed. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since the accident, I slept. I slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a man who has made his peace with what he has to do. I slept like a lion waiting for the gazelle to step into the tall grass. When I woke up, it would be Judgment Day, and I was the judge. Friday morning arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. The humidity had broken, leaving the air crisp and clear. It was the kind of day that usually signaled a new beginning. For me, it signaled the end of the charade, the end of my patience, and the end of my family. I sat in my favorite armchair in the living room. I was dressed in my best Sunday suit. It was a charcoal gray three-piece suit I had bought in London 10 years ago. It was a little loose around the waist now, but it still commanded respect. I had polished my shoes until I could see my reflection in the leather. I wanted to look my best for the execution. Kimberly was already pacing the room. She looked like she was walking a runway. She was wearing a cream-colored silk dress that shimmered under the recessed lighting. On her wrist was a gold bracelet encrusted with diamonds. On her feet were shoes with red soles that I knew cost more than my first car. I knew exactly where she got them. My private investigator had sent me the credit card alerts 2 days ago. She had gone on a shopping spree at the luxury mall downtown. She had spent $12,000 in 3 hours. She was wearing my money. She was wearing the sweat off my brow and the years of my labor. She paraded around my living room, acting like the lady of the manor while treating me like the furniture. "You look nice, Reginald," she said without looking at me. She was adjusting a vase of flowers on the mantel. Flowers she had bought with my money. "Try not to spill anything on yourself today. We want the photos to look dignified." Photos, of course. They wanted documentation. They wanted to prove that I was happy. They wanted to prove that I was handing over my empire with a smile. The doorbell rang at 10 o'clock sharp. It was not a guest. It was the execution squad. Terrence rolled himself into the room. He was wearing a suit too, but it was ill-fitting and wrinkled. He looked sweaty. His eyes were darting around the room, checking the windows, checking the doors. He was terrified. He knew that if this did not happen today, the shark would come for him. He needed my signature like a drowning man needs air. Behind him walked Dr. Vance, the fake doctor with the sweaty palms. And with him was a new face, a man with a briefcase and a smile that looked like a razor blade. "This is Mr. Stone, Terrence," said his voice tight. "He is the lawyer we told you about, Dad." He prepared the paperwork. Mr. Stone walked over and shook my hand. His grip was wet and weak. "Mr. King," he said, "it is an honor. I have heard so much about you." "I bet you have," I said. My voice was raspy. I let my hand tremble in his. I let my head bob slightly. I was playing the part. We sat around the coffee table. Kimberly brought out a cake. It was a small grocery store cake with a single candle. She lit it. "Happy birthday, Reginald," she said. Her voice was flat. "Make a wish." I looked at the flame. I looked at the 3 vultures circling me. "I wish for justice," I said. They laughed. It was a nervous, stilted laughter. "That is a nice wish," Dad Terrence said. He blew out the candle for me. "Okay, party is over. Let us get to business." Mr. Stone opened his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of documents 3 inches thick. He set them on the table with a heavy thud. "These are standard documents, Mr. King," Mr. Stone said. "We have consolidated everything for your convenience." He started flipping pages. "This one is the durable power of attorney," he explained. "It gives your son Terrence full authority over your financial decisions. It allows him to access your accounts, sell property, and manage your investments." He flipped another page. "This is the medical power of attorney. It gives Kimberly the right to make health decisions for you. If you need to be placed in a facility, she can authorize it without a court order." He flipped again. "And this is the quitclaim deed for the house. It transfers the title to Terrence and Kimberly immediately. It allows you to retain residency rights for as long as they deem appropriate. As long as they deem appropriate." That was the legal way of saying until they dropped me off at the state asylum. And finally, Mr. Stone said, pulling out a separate document, "This is the Living Trust Amendment. It revokes all previous wills and names Terrence and Kimberly as the sole beneficiaries of your entire estate effective immediately upon signature." I looked at the papers. They were death warrants. They were stripping me of my home, my money, my health, and my legacy. They were taking everything I had built over 70 years and handing it to a thief and a fraud. "It is a lot of paper," I whispered. My hands shook violently in my lap. "It is just legalese," Dad Terrence said. He leaned forward. His cologne was overpowering. It was trying to mask the smell of fear sweat. "It just means we can take care of you. It means you do not have to worry about bills or taxes or anything. We handle it all." "Just sign it," Reginald Kimberly said. She picked up a heavy fountain pen from the table. It was my pen, a Mont Blanc I had bought in Geneva. She uncapped it and held it out to me. "Do it for us. Do it for the family." I looked at the pen. I looked at Terrence. "And the patent royalties," I asked. What Terrence snapped. "The royalties," I said. "From the dampeners. Are those in there too?" Mr. Stone looked confused, but Terrence nodded vigorously. "Yes, Dad. Everything. The royalties too. We will manage them. We will make sure they are invested wisely." Invested wisely. He meant he would gamble them away or hand them over to a loan shark. I reached for the pen. My hand shook so bad I dropped it. It clattered onto the glass table. "Oops," I said. "I am sorry. My nerves." Kimberly sighed, a sound of pure irritation. She picked up the pen. "Here," she said. She moved around the table and stood next to me. She smelled of expensive perfume and rot. She grabbed my right hand. Her fingers were cold and hard. She shoved the pen into my fingers and wrapped her hand around mine. "I will help you," she said. Her voice was sickly sweet, but her grip was like a vice. "Just hold the pen, Reginald. I will guide your hand." She forced my hand toward the signature line on the bottom of the first page. "The power of attorney." "Sign it," she hissed in my ear. "Sign it, you old fool." I felt Terrence's eyes on me. He was holding his breath. Dr. Vance was wiping sweat from his upper lip. Mr. Stone was tapping his foot. They were so close. They could taste the money. They could see the zeros in their bank accounts. I let the pen hover over the paper. I felt the pressure of Kimberly's hand trying to force the ink onto the page. But then I stopped shaking. My hand went rigid. The tremor vanished. My arm became like a steel beam. Kimberly tried to push. I pushed back. Her eyes widened. She looked down at me. "What are you doing?" she whispered. I looked up at her. I let the mask fall. I let the confusion drain from my eyes. I let the weakness evaporate from my posture. I looked at her with the cold, hard stare of a man who has fired hundreds of people, who has stared down union bosses and corrupt inspectors. "I am fixing a structural defect," I said. I pulled my hand free from her grip. I did it with a sharp, violent jerk that made her stumble back in her $3,000 heels. I held the pen on my own. I did not shake. I did not waver. I looked at Terrence. His mouth was open. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "You want a signature, son?" I asked. My voice was strong. It filled the room. It bounced off the walls. "I will give you a signature." I pressed the nib of the pen to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. I did not write Reginald King. I wrote in large block letters that tore through the paper. Never. I stared at the word. It was beautiful. It was the strongest thing I had ever built. Then I stood up. I stood up straight. I did not use the armrests. I did not use a cane. I towered over them. Kimberly gasped. Terrence pushed his wheelchair back, hitting the table. "What is this?" Terrence stammered. "What did you write?" I tossed the expensive pen onto the document. It rolled across the word never. "I wrote my verdict," I said. Dr. Vance stood up looking panicked. "I think I should go. This seems like a family matter." "Sit down," I barked. It was a command, not a request. Dr. Vance sat down. "You think I am senile?" I asked, looking at each of them. "You think I am a confused old man who puts remote controls in the fridge?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder I had been carrying for 3 days. I slammed it onto the table next to the papers. "I heard you," I said. "I heard you in the kitchen. I heard you in the bedroom. I heard you talking to the shark. I heard you planning to send me to Shady Acres." Terrence's face turned gray. "You have been recording us. Every word I said, every lie, every threat, including the part where you said you would strangle me if I did not sign. Kimberly lunged for the recorder. She was desperate, she was wild, but she never reached it, because at that exact moment the sound of sirens cut through the morning air. It started as a low wail in the distance, but it grew louder and louder until it filled the room, until it vibrated the glass in the windows. Kimberly froze. Terrence looked at the window. Blue and red lights flashed against the curtains. Tires screeched in the driveway. Car doors slammed. "What did you do?" Kimberly screamed. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You crazy old man, what did you do?" I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf who had finally closed the trap. "I invited some more guests to the party," I said. I walked to the front door. I unlocked it. I threw it open. Detective Lewis was standing there. Behind him was the sheriff. Behind them were 4 uniformed deputies. And behind them, walking with the purpose of a man carrying a nuclear weapon, was my lawyer Anderson. "Gentlemen," I said, stepping aside, "the party is in the living room, and the guests of honor are waiting." Lewis walked in first. He looked at Terrence. He looked at the wheelchair. He looked at the fear on his face. "Terrence King," he said, his voice calm and professional, "you have the right to remain silent, but I suggest you start talking. Because your father just handed us the shovel you used to dig your own grave." The front door did not just open, it exploded inward with a force that shook the pictures on the walls. The sound was like a thunderclap that shattered the suffocating tension of the living room. The heavy oak door bounced off the stopper and revealed the army I had assembled. Detective Lewis stepped over the threshold first. He was not wearing his fishing vest today. He was wearing his old badge on a chain around his neck, and he held a service pistol at his side, not pointed, but ready. His face was set in lines of grim determination, the face of a man who had seen too much evil and was ready to stomp it out. Behind him was Sheriff Miller, a man I had known since we were boys playing stickball in the street. Miller filled the doorway, his uniform crisp, his hand resting heavily on his holster. And behind them, filling the porch and the front lawn, were 4 uniformed officers and a tactical team with vests and serious eyes. But the man who frightened them the most was not carrying a weapon. He walked in last, moving through the sea of blue uniforms like Moses parting the Red Sea. It was Anderson. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Terrence's medical bills combined. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it held nuclear codes. He did not look at the police. He did not look at the furniture. He looked straight at the table where the unsigned papers lay. The room erupted into chaos. Dr. Vance, the fake doctor, scrambled backward, his chair screeching against the floor. He looked like a rat looking for a sewer drain. Mr. Stone, the crooked lawyer, clutched his briefcase to his chest, his face draining of all color. Terrence reacted with the blind panic of a cornered animal. He spun his wheelchair around, his hands slipping on the wheels. He screamed at the officers, his voice cracking and high. "Get out! Get out of my house!" He pointed a shaking finger at Sheriff Miller. "You have no right to be here. This is a private residence. This is a family matter. We are having a meeting. Get out right now or I will sue you for everything you have." He was delirious. He was so deep in his own delusion of power that he thought he could order the police around. He thought he was the king of the castle because he had bullied an old man. Sheriff Miller did not even blink. He stepped into the living room, his boots heavy on the floor. He looked at Terrence with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Sit down, son," Miller said. His voice was low and rumbling like an idling diesel engine. "You are done giving orders. This is a crime scene now." "A crime scene?" Kimberly shrieked. She stood up, her expensive dress rustling. She looked wild, her hair coming loose from its perfect bun. "There is no crime here. We are just signing papers. My father-in-law is sick. We are helping him. This is harassment. I am calling the news." Anderson stepped forward. He moved with a silence that was terrifying. He walked to the head of the table and placed his briefcase down. The sound of the leather hitting the glass was soft, but it silenced the room. He clicked the gold latches open. Snap, snap. "I am not here for the news," Mrs. King Anderson said. His voice was smooth, polished, and cold as ice. "And I am not here to discuss your father-in-law health. I am here representing my client." He gestured to me with an open hand. "I represent Mr. Reginald King Anderson," announced. Kimberly laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. "Representation. He does not need representation. He has us. He has no money for a lawyer like you. Who are you anyway?" Anderson ignored her. He pulled a single thick document from his briefcase. It was bound in blue legal paper. He held it up so everyone could see the gold embossed seal on the front. I am the chief legal counsel for King Holdings, Anderson said. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet you hear in a cemetery? King Holdings, Terrence whispered. He looked confused. He looked at me, then back at Anderson. What is King Holdings? Anderson opened the document. He began to read. He did not read like a lawyer. He read like a town crier announcing a royal decree. Mr. Reginald King is the sole proprietor and majority shareholder of King Holdings, Anderson said. He is the primary patent holder for the King seismic isolation system currently utilized in over 400 skyscrapers across North America, Asia, and the Middle East. He paused to let the words sink in. I watched Terrence's face. I watched the gears turning in his head. Seismic, skyscrapers, patents. The words were hitting him, but he could not process them. They did not fit the narrative of the retired mechanic he thought he knew. Anderson continued. As of the market close yesterday, the total valuation of Mr. King liquid and fixed assets, including offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and real estate holdings in Dubai, London, and New York, is not $500,000. Anderson looked directly at Kimberly. It is $52 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Kimberly was holding a glass of sparkling water she had poured for herself earlier. Her hand went slack. Her fingers opened. The glass fell. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered into 1,000 wet diamonds. Water splashed over her $3,000 shoes. She did not flinch. She did not look down. She did not move. She stared at Anderson, her mouth hanging open in a perfect O of shock. Her eyes were wide and glassy. 52 million, she whispered. The words came out like a prayer. Terrence looked like he had been hit in the chest with a sledgehammer. He slumped in his wheelchair. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. He looked at me. He looked at the man he had called a failure. He looked at the man he had called a project. 52 million. He had tried to kill me for a $2.5 million insurance policy. He had tried to steal my pension checks. He had sold my land for pennies. He had been sitting on a gold mine, and he had tried to blow it up for the copper wiring. It was time. I stood up. I did not push myself up with the armrests. I did not groan. I did not wobble. I stood up straight, my spine aligning my shoulders, squaring. I let the tremors vanish from my hands. I let the fog clear from my eyes. I let the weakness evaporate from my posture. I grew 3 inches in front of their eyes. I was no longer the frail old man in the cardigan. I was the engineer who had stood on steel beams 80 stories in the air. I was the man who had commanded crews of 200 men. I was the man who held the earth still. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had pushed me down a cliff of lies for 25 years. You thought I was a mark, I said. My voice was deep and steady. It filled the room, bouncing off the walls. You thought I was a simple old man who got lucky with a few investments. You never asked about my work, Terrence. You never asked about the patents. You never asked who I really was because you were too busy looking at my wallet. Terrence shrank back. He looked terrified. He looked like he was seeing a stranger. Dad, he stammered. I didn't know. We didn't know. I walked around the table. Dr. Vance scrambled out of my way, knocking his chair over. I stood over Terrence. I cast a shadow over him. I had a plan, Terrence, I said. I looked down at him with cold, clear eyes. I had a trust set up. It was going to mature on your 40th birthday, 2 years from now. I saw the realization hit him. I saw the pain of it. I was going to give it all to you, I said. The company, the accounts, the legacy, all of it. $52 million. It was yours. It was all yours. Kimberly let out a sob. She put her hand over her mouth. All you had to do was wait, I said. All you had to do was be a decent human being. All you had to do was love me, or at least respect me. But you couldn't do it. You were too greedy. You were too impatient. You wanted a quick payout. I leaned down. My face was inches from his. You tried to kill me for an insurance policy worth $2.5 million, I whispered. You traded an empire for a used car lot. That is the worst trade in the history of business, son. I stood up and looked at Kimberly. She was trembling. Tears were running down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. And you, I said. You treated me like a dog. You threw my food in the trash. You poisoned my tea. You tried to gaslight me into an asylum. You thought you were so smart. You thought you were playing chess with a toddler. I walked over to the table and picked up the unsigned power of attorney document. I held it up. You wanted control, I said. You wanted power. I ripped the document in half. The sound of tearing paper was loud and satisfying. I ripped it again and again. I let the pieces flutter down onto Terrence's lap like confetti at the saddest parade in the world. Now you get nothing, I said. 0. I turned to Detective Lewis. Get them out of my house, I said. Lewis stepped forward. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. Terrence King, Lewis said. Kimberly King, please stand up and put your hands behind your back. Terrence looked at the handcuffs. He looked at me. Dad, please, he begged. His voice was broken. We can fix this. I am your son. You cannot send me to jail. Think about the family. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had sat by my bed last night and told me he despised me. I looked at the man who had laughed about my death in a hospital hallway. I do not have a son, I said. My son died a long time ago. You are just a thief who broke into my house. I turned my back on them. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. Neighbors were gathering on the sidewalk drawn by the police cars. They were watching the spectacle. I heard the click of the handcuffs. I heard Kimberly screaming that it was a mistake, that she was innocent. I heard Terrence sobbing, but I did not turn around. I watched the leaves blowing in the wind. I watched the world keep turning. I had won. I had saved my life. I had saved my fortune. But as I listened to them being dragged out of the house I built, I did not feel like a winner. I felt like a man who had survived an earthquake only to find that his home was still standing, but it was empty. The structure was sound. The foundation held. But the heart of the house was gone. You are insane! Kimberly screamed, her voice reaching a pitch that shattered the stunned silence of the room. She pointed a trembling finger at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. You are senile, old man. You are hallucinating. None of this is real. You are making it up because you are sick. You need help. Officer, look at him. He is delusional. She spun around to face Sheriff Miller, her eyes wild. He has dementia, she shrieked, grabbing the sheriff's arm. He thinks he is rich. He thinks we are trying to kill him. It is all in his head. You have to arrest him for filing a false report. You have to take him to the hospital. Sheriff Miller looked down at her hand on his uniform. He peeled her fingers off him one by one as if he were removing a sticky insect. He did not speak to her. He looked at Detective Lewis. Lewis stepped forward. He did not say a word. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black remote control. He pointed it at the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life. The static hummed for a second before the image resolved. It was grainy black and white footage. It was nighttime. The timestamp in the corner read 2:14 a.m. on Tuesday. Kimberly stopped screaming. Terrence froze in his wheelchair, his eyes glued to the screen. That is footage from Mrs. Higgins' dash cam across the street, Lewis said, his voice calm and level. Her car records motion. And guess what it saw on Tuesday night? On the screen, a figure appeared. It was dark, but the street lamp illuminated him clearly enough. It was a man. He was wearing a hoodie, but he had the hood down. He was limping slightly, favoring his left leg. It was Terrence. We watched in silence as the on-screen Terrence walked up to my truck. He looked around nervously. He checked the windows of my house, then he slid underneath the chassis. He was under there for 4 minutes. When he crawled back out, he was holding something in his hand, a pair of wire cutters. He stood up, wiped them on his pants, and walked back toward the house. The video ended. The screen went black. That is impossible, Terrence whispered. His face was the color of ash. That is not me. That is a deep fake. You doctored it. Lewis ignored him. He pressed another button on the remote. The TV screen remained black, but audio began to play. It was clear. It was crisp. It was the recording from my bedroom the night before. Terrence's voice filled the living room, loud and hateful. You look so peaceful. You always look peaceful, even when the world is burning down. I watched Kimberly's face as she listened to her husband's voice. She looked horrified, not because of what he was saying, but because she knew what it meant for her. I found a place for you. The recording continued. It is called Shady Acres. It smells like urine and bleach. They strap the patients to the beds. The deputies in the room shifted uncomfortably. Sheriff Miller's jaw tightened. You should have just died in the crash, the recorded Terrence hissed. It would have been cleaner. Now you are going to die knowing I despise you. Lewis stopped the audio. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. That was recorded 7 hours ago, Lewis said, in this house, while Mr. King pretended to sleep to save his own life. But we are not done, Lewis continued. He pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket. We picked up Dr. Vance about an hour ago trying to board a bus to Mexico. He was very chatty once we told him he was facing conspiracy to commit murder. Lewis pressed play on the small device. Dr. Vance's voice trembled through the tiny speaker. It was her idea. The woman, Kimberly. She contacted me 3 weeks ago. She said the old man had millions stashed away. She offered me $50,000 to sign the competency papers. She said if I didn't do it, they would find someone else. She said they were going to drug him to make him look crazy. I just wanted the money. I didn't know they were going to try to kill him. I swear. Kimberly backed away, shaking her head. No, she whispered. No, that is a lie. He is lying. And finally Lewis said, we have a statement from Ms. Etta taken this morning at the nursing home. She confirms hearing Terrence on the phone in the hospital hallway bragging about the brake lines and the insurance money. Lewis looked at Terrence. We checked the brake lines, son. They were cut, 70% through. Just enough to hold until you hit the canyon. You tried to kill your father, and you almost killed yourself instead. It is over, Terrence, I said from the head of the table. The game is over. Terrence looked at the screen. He looked at the recorder. He looked at the handcuffs hanging from the sheriff's belt. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. The arrogance evaporated. The cruelty vanished. All that was left was a scared little boy who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar, only this time the jar was full of poison. Dad, he croaked. Sheriff Miller stepped forward. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. Terrence King, you are under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and elder abuse, Miller said. He grabbed Terrence's good arm and twisted it behind the wheelchair back. He snapped the cuff on. Then he grabbed the arm in the sling and handled it with professional roughness, securing it to the chair frame. No, Terrence sobbed. No, please. I can't go to jail. My leg. I need medical attention. You will get it in the infirmary, Miller said. Kimberly saw the cuffs go on her husband. She saw the ship sinking, and she decided she wasn't going down with it. She bolted. She kicked off her high heels and ran for the kitchen door. She moved fast, fueled by adrenaline and desperation. Stop her! Lewis shouted. But she was already through the kitchen. I heard the back door slam open. She didn't get far. 2 uniformed officers were waiting on the back porch. I heard a scream, then the sound of a struggle. A moment later, they dragged her back into the living room. Her expensive dress was torn. Her hair was wild. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. Let me go, she screamed, kicking at the officers. I didn't do anything. It was him. It was all him. She pointed her chin at Terrence. He forced me, she yelled, desperate to save herself. He is violent. He threatened me. He said if I didn't help him get the money, he would kill me too. I am a victim here. I was just trying to survive. Terrence's head snapped up. He looked at his wife, the woman he had conspired with, the woman he had ruined his life for. You lying witch, he screamed. It was your idea. You found the accounts. You found the forger. You told me to cut the brakes. You said he was just a useless old man taking up space. They screamed at each other, hurling accusations and insults, tearing each other apart like wolves fighting over a carcass. It was ugly. It was pathetic. And it was the final proof of who they really were. Enough, I roared. My voice silenced them. They both looked at me, panting, sweating, bound in chains. I walked up to Terrence. I looked him in the eye. I searched for any trace of the son I had loved. I looked for the boy I had taught to fish. I looked for the man I had hoped he would become. There was nothing there. Just greed and fear. Dad Terrence whimpered. Tears streamed down his face. Dad, please. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't mean it. It was the drugs. It was the stress. It was Kimberly. She made me crazy. Please tell them to let me go. We can fix this. I am your son. He tried to reach for me, but the cuffs held him back. I am your boy, Dad. You saved me once. Save me again. Please. I looked at him. I felt a pain in my chest that was sharper than any heart attack. It was the pain of severing a limb to save the body. I leaned down close to his face. Do not call me Dad, I whispered. My voice was cold as the grave. I did not raise a demon, I said. I raised a man. That man died a long time ago. You are just a stranger who broke into my house. I stood up and turned my back on him. "Take them away," I said to the sheriff. "No!" Terrence screamed as they began to wheel him out. "No, Dad, please. Do not do this." Kimberly was shrieking, cursing me, cursing Terrence, cursing the world. I watched them go. I watched them get dragged out the front door and down the steps. I watched the neighbors staring from their lawns, their mouths open in shock. I watched them get shoved into the back of separate squad cars. I watched the flashing lights fade as they drove away. The house went silent. It was just me, Anderson Lewis, and the sheriff left in the room. The air was still thick with the energy of the arrest. "Are you okay?" Reggie Lewis asked, putting a hand on my shoulder. I looked around the living room. I looked at the shattered glass on the floor. I looked at the torn papers on the table. "No, Lewis," I said. "I am not okay." I walked over to the mantelpiece. There was a framed photo there. It was taken 20 years ago. It was me, Althea, and Terrence on his high school graduation day. We looked happy. We looked like a family. I took the photo out of the frame. I looked at it for a long moment, then I ripped it in half. I dropped the pieces into the trash can. "I am not okay," I repeated. "But I am alive, and that is a start." Anderson stepped forward, closing his briefcase. "We will need to file the formal charges, Mr. King," he said, "and we need to secure the assets. I suggest we move you to a hotel for a few days while the police process the house." I nodded. "Good idea." I walked to the window and looked out at the empty driveway. My truck was gone. My family was gone. My life as I knew it was gone. But as I stood there, I felt something strange. I felt light. The weight of the lies was gone. The weight of the fear was gone. I was alone, but I was free. I turned back to my friends. "Let us go," I said. "I need a drink. And then I need to start building something new." Because that is what engineers do. When a structure fails, we do not just mourn the rubble. We clear it away, we pour a new foundation, and we build something stronger. The sound of the gavel hitting the wood block was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was louder than the car crash. It was louder than the sirens. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on 25 years of my life. The courtroom was packed. The story of the engineer who survived his son's murder plot had made the national news. Strangers filled the benches behind me, whispering and pointing, but I did not look at them. I kept my eyes fixed on the two people standing before the judge in orange jumpsuits. Terrence looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He had lost weight in the 6 months he spent in county jail waiting for trial. His hair was thinning. His posture was slumped. He looked like a building that had been condemned. When the judge asked him if he had anything to say, he tried to speak, but no words came out. He just shook his head and looked at the floor. Kimberly was different. She stood rigid, her chin high, her eyes burning with a cold fury that had not diminished. She still believed she was the victim. She still believed the world owed her a living. When asked for her statement, she spat out a few words about being manipulated and misunderstood, but the jury had not bought it. They had seen the videos. They had heard the recordings. They knew who she was. The judge adjusted his glasses and read from the paper in front of him. "Terrence King, for the charge of attempted murder in the first-degree insurance fraud and elder abuse, I sentence you to 25 years in a state penitentiary without the possibility of parole for 20 years. Terrence flinched as if he had been struck. A low moan escaped his lips. 25 years. He would be an old man when he got out. He would be older than I was when he tried to kill me. The judge turned to Kimberly. "Kimberly King, for the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and identity theft, I sentence you to 15 years in a state penitentiary." She did not scream this time. She just closed her eyes and let out a long breath. The handcuffs clicked as the bailiffs moved in. As they led them away, Terrence stopped. He turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were wet. He mouthed one word. "Dad." I did not respond. I did not nod. I did not look away. I watched him until the heavy side door closed behind him. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, like a limb that had been amputated, but the wound was clean. The infection was gone. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Detective Lewis was waiting for me at the bottom of the steps. He handed me a cup of coffee. "It is done, Reggie," he said. "It is done," I replied. We stood there for a moment watching the city traffic. What now? Lewis asked. Now, I said, taking a sip of the coffee. Now I clean up the rest of the mess. The first thing I did was sell the house. I could not live there anymore. Every room held a ghost. The kitchen where Kimberly had thrown away my food. The bedroom where Terrence had whispered his hatred. The hallway where I had hidden the phone. It was a beautiful house. I had built the addition myself. I had laid the hardwood floors. But the foundation was poisoned. I sold it to a young couple with a baby on the way. They walked through the rooms with wide, excited eyes, seeing a future where I only saw a past. I sold it to them for below market value. I wanted good energy to fill that space. I wanted laughter to replace the silence. On the last day, I walked through the empty rooms one final time. My footsteps echoed on the floorboards. I touched the wall where Althea used to hang her paintings. I said a silent goodbye to the life we had built. I left the keys on the kitchen counter. I walked out the front door and locked it behind me. I did not look back. The money from the house sale, along with a significant portion of my patent royalties, went into a new project. I met with Anderson in his high-rise office overlooking the city. We sat at a mahogany table covered in documents. "This is a generous endowment," Reginald Anderson said, looking over the paperwork. "The Althea King Scholarship for Engineering." I nodded. "It is for orphans," I said. "For kids who age out of the system with nothing. Kids who have the mind for building but no one to give them a hammer." It was my answer to Terrence. He had been an orphan. I had given him everything and he had destroyed it. Now I would give that chance to children who would appreciate it. I would pay for their tuition, their books, their housing. I would give them the foundation I had tried to give my son. But this time I would not just give money. I would give mentorship. I would be part of the board. I would meet these young men and women. I would look them in the eye and see who had the fire to build. "It is a beautiful legacy," Anderson said, signing the final page. "It is better than a tombstone," I said. My own living arrangements were much simpler now. I bought a condo in the city. It was small, modern, and secure. It had a doorman and a view of the river. It did not have a yard to maintain. It did not have spare bedrooms for ungrateful guests. It was a fortress of solitude, and I loved it. But I was not alone. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I drove my new car out to the suburbs. I pulled into the circular driveway of Golden Oak Assisted Living. It was not a warehouse for the dying. It was a resort. There were manicured gardens, fountains, and a grand lobby that smelled of fresh lilies. I walked through the automatic doors. The staff knew me. They waved as I passed. "She is in the garden," Mr. King, a nurse said, smiling. "She loves the roses." I walked out to the patio. Ms. Etta was sitting in a cushioned wicker chair, a blanket over her lap, watching a pair of cardinals in the bird bath. She looked different. Her hair was washed and styled. Her skin had color. She was wearing a soft pink cardigan I had brought her last week. She heard my footsteps and turned. Her face lit up. "Reginald," she said, "you are late." "Traffic, Etta," I said, smiling. I leaned down and kissed her cheek. "I brought you something." I pulled a small box from my pocket. Inside were chocolate truffles from a shop in Belgium. "You are going to make me fat," she scolded, taking the box eagerly. We sat there in the sun, listening to the water in the fountain. It was peaceful. It was real. Etta was not my blood. She was a stranger I met in a hospital room while my son was plotting my murder. But she had saved my life. She had grabbed my hand when she could have stayed silent. She had risked her safety to warn me. She was more family to me than Terrence had ever been. I am paying for her room here. I am paying for her care. I am paying for her clothes and her chocolates. It costs a fortune, and I do not care. She will never spend another night in a place that smells like bleach and despair. She will live like a queen until her last day. "Did you hear about the sentencing?" she asked, popping a truffle into her mouth. I nodded. "It is over. They are gone." "Good," she said. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was still strong. "You look tired, Reginald." "I am tired, Etta," I admitted. "It was a long war." "But you won," she said. "You are still standing." I looked at the garden. I looked at the strong oak trees that lined the property. They had deep roots. They could weather any storm. "I learned something, Etta," I said. "I learned that you cannot build a life on a cracked foundation, no matter how much you want it to stand." She squeezed my hand. "And what else did you learn?" "I learned what family really is," I said. "For 45 years I thought family was the people you lived with, the people you shared a name with, the people you raised. I thought it was obligation and blood. I was wrong. Family are the people who stand by you when the walls are falling down. Family are the people who pull you out of the wreckage. Family are the people who tell you the truth even when it hurts. Detective Lewis is my family. He dropped everything at 3 in the morning to save me. Anderson is my family. He fought for me when I could not fight for myself. And you, Etta, you are my family. She smiled and her eyes crinkled at the corners. We are a funny-looking family, she said. An old engineer, a retired cop, a lawyer, and a nosy old woman. I laughed. It felt good to laugh. It felt like something broken inside my chest was finally knitting back together. We are the best kind of family, I said. We are the kind that survives. I stayed with her until the sun went down. We talked about the news. We talked about the birds. We talked about nothing important. When I left, I walked to my car feeling light. The heavy burden of betrayal was gone. The shadow of my son was gone. I am Reginald King. I am 71 years old. I have $52 million in the bank. I have a new home. I have good friends. And for the first time in a long time, I am not afraid of the dark. I started the engine and drove out of the gate. I merged onto the highway, heading back toward the city skyline. I saw the skyscrapers in the distance, tall and proud against the twilight. I knew that deep inside them, hidden in the steel and concrete, were my dampeners. They were holding those buildings up. They were keeping them safe, just like I had kept myself safe. I turned on the radio. Music filled the car. I drove on, ready for whatever came next, because I knew that no matter what happened, I had the strength to handle it. I had rebuilt my life from the rubble, and this time I had built it to last. Did you enjoy this story? Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. If you liked the story, you can support me by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel so I can keep bringing you more stories like this. Thank you so much for your support. I look forward to reading your comments. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more on my channel. Do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect. This journey taught me that the strongest foundations aren't made of concrete but of genuine respect and loyalty. For years, I believed that family meant enduring anything for the sake of blood, even betrayal. I was wrong. True family protects you when the walls fall down. They don't hand you the shovel to dig your own grave. I learned that it is never too late to demand dignity, to sever toxic ties, and to rebuild a life defined by peace rather than obligation. If you are holding on to a relationship that hurts you, remember you have the strength to walk away and build something better. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Stay strong and see you in the next video.